Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. My name is Brian Vitale. With me today, I have Josh Torres.
After thinking about it, I think Guel Jaturk is a cool name.
We have Adam Vitale.
What about Farigarath?
We have James Glizio.
I don't want to say that name out loud if I can help it.
And Chaman Wu.
How's it going?
Josh, was that name a Gundam character name? Who was that?
Yeah, it's from the new series, The Witch from Mercury. One of the characters' names is Guel Jaturk.
I have not watched that yet, but from what I understand, it has more of a canon lesbian romance than 13 episodes of Like a Recoil.
I don't know. We'll see.
Iron Blood Orphan has a lesbian couple.
Yeah.
But I never know that unless you watch the whole series.
I told a friend that, like, I've heard this described as basically Utena. Do you want to watch it? And she was like, sure. And then she's like, no, this is basically Utena. Let's watch some Utena clips now.
Even the art style has kind of got a shoujo art style to it, really.
Well, one of the writing talents on it is from Utena. I don't remember the name, though.
I think one of the writers is like, I think they did the novelization of Utena or something like that. And I was looking into it. But yeah, it's interesting. It was an interesting first episode. That's what we're working on.
This is why you all tune into the Tetracast.
Yeah.
So you can talk about which every week we'll check in on which from Mercury. And
let's go finally challenge our time.
It's really convenient. There's exactly 3 companies in the new Gundam series, and Quentin said it might end up like Fire Emblem Free Houses. Which corporation she's going to help out?
We'll see.
So this week has actually been quite a bit heavy on the news front. That was a little bit surprising. We got a lot of news out of a little bit out of Nintendo, some out of Square Enix, a lot out of CD Projekt. Well, in a way, we'll talk about that. In the game release front, it's been a little bit slower, but we have a lot looking forward to for the later half of the month. And I know that at least 2 of us here have spent some time looking at some newer kind of indie or like AA games. I know some people hate AA, but I don't know like what else to call that kind of tier of development. So we'll have a couple of different titles that we don't normally put space for on the podcast here as we wait for late October releases like Star Ocean: The Divine Force and Persona ports on PC. More on that later. We also have a bunch of features that have gone up on the site over the last week. Some of these we kind of preempted last week on the podcast, and James wrote up a few of these. Some of these are also some things that we weren't expecting. But what we're going to start out with is a game that is releasing in the next week. But if you pre-order it, you can get like early access like 3 days early. So it comes out tomorrow effectively. And that is a game called Asterigos: Curse of the Stars. Now, I know we've talked about this game in a very newsy format on the podcast previously, but obviously it's not like a heavy-hitting title. But this is something that Adam has started, and we're going to let him talk about it in kind of a preview sense here. It's kind of an interesting situation with the game's release, but having a pre-order that allows you to play it early and having a demo that's available now, so any of you listening can play it early as well. So, Adam, what is Asterigos: Curse of the Stars, like, and why should people care about it? Why does it matter?
I mean, well, first of all, you are pronouncing it correctly. I remember when you just read the word. No, you are pronouncing it correctly. When you read the word with an American English like mindset, you might think like Asterigos or something. But you got to remember it's like set in like a Greco-Roman type setting. So you kind of have to have like a Greco-Roman type mindset when reading the word, like, oh, okay, it's Asterigos.
That was totally at the front of my mind when I was reading that. I was like, Greco-Roman.
Yes. Anyways, so this is a game. It's an indie game, and it's from a studio called Acme Game Studio. I looked it up. They're based in Taiwan, and this is their first project. And it sounds like they basically formed in 2016, and this is their first game. Not saying the game was in development that long, but they probably had plans for it when they formed. So it's been a long time coming. So what this game is, it's an action RPG. Like I said, in a Greco-Roman type setting. So lots of legionnaires and that sort of architecture with like the granite pillar, centurions, chariots, shields, spears, things like that. And this game is an action RPG. And I'm just going to come out and say it does borrow some elements from Souls-like games, but not all of them. So you could call it maybe a Souls-Light instead. What I mean by that is, I'll get to the story premise stuff later, but you are out on a relatively interconnected open world. It's not open world, but like interconnected zones in the game, and you don't get a map. And throughout the world, you find these. I actually don't even remember what they're called. I think they're called conduits, and that basically act as bonfires. That's where you heal, and that's where if you activate them, the enemies around you respawn. And there's a lot of emphasis on once you are navigating through the world, you find a shortcut, so back to an earlier place. So things like that. It's got that sort of structure to it. Now, what the game actually is, like in terms of its premise, you play as a young female warrior. I forget what you're from, like a tribe named Hilda. She's kind of a redhead, has a braided ponytail sort of thing. You might have seen some of the key art for it because she's the main character that you play as. And you are investigating a cursed city known as Aspes, I believe. And the curse is the curse of Asterigos. That's hence the title of the game. So this is a city that's basically been like locked in time for 1,000 years. And there's other weird things happening in the city. Like, for example, there's a cult of people that they worship some deity and they turn into werewolves. Yeah, very Greco-Roman there. And there's lots of other things that you kind of figure out as you go through the city. And you're searching for your father, who basically came to investigate the city before you. So you're not only investigating the city, but you're like, where did my dad go? And the game itself, I saw the trailer that was released for it last week. It's like a 5-minute kind of gameplay trailer showing some of the action combat and things like that. So you have 6 weapon types. There's like hammer, sword and shield, spear, and so on. And you can equip 2 at a time. And basically, depending on which 2 you have equipped, you have like various combos kind of interchanging between the 2. And I saw this gameplay trailer last week, and I actually thought, hey, this looks actually pretty good, or at least halfway decent. And then kind of alongside that, the PR is like, hey, do you want to review this game? We're offering codes for it. I'm like, yeah, let me give it a shot. Now that puts me in a slightly weird spot where I am embargoed to talk about some things, even though the game itself is already out if you pre-ordered.
So yeah, you're in kind of a weird spot because like there's a demo available on Steam now, so you can play it now. The game comes out the 11th. So if you get 3-day pre-order access, you can literally play it like now or soon. By the time this podcast is published and anyone's listening to it, you can play it if you pre-order it. But the embargo is not until Tuesday, so I don't know. I'm not too concerned.
Yeah, but so in terms of the game itself, your leveling up is more traditional. It's not like a Souls game where you collect souls or whatever and spend them on some sort of stat system. But you level up more traditionally with like an EXP meter and things like that, and you have a skill tree with your 6 different weapon types that you basically spend points that you get and you level up to go through. So some of the like stat progression sort of systems are more traditional RPG-ish sort of things. It's more the world structure itself that just kind of borrows some ideas from Souls games. I kind of hate that I've said Souls so many times, but it just got that structure to it, and I actually wasn't really expecting that going in.
How do you always get stuck on these? Like you did like Steel Rising just now and The Surge. Not
my calling is to play the games, all these not Souls games.
Yeah, I like the saga of you like being like a Souls-like games expert, but that never actually touching like the main Souls games yourself.
Yeah,
it's pretty good. It's a good shtick.
The one part about the game that I'm kind of like most lukewarm on is I don't really care about the story that's going on. There's some interesting kind of just like on a surface level thing, like, oh, cool, there's cultists that turn into werewolves, but like I don't actually care about like really what's happening here. And that's fine. I usually
at all.
No, not really. Like I usually play these sorts of games more for the exploration and the combat and the questing and things like that. So the story stuff is good enough. Like it's not like drawing me in, like, oh, I have to really figure out what happened here, but it's good enough. It's fine. This game, even though it is an indie title, and the developer refers to himself as indie, so I'm not like slapping that label on them. That's kind of their self definition there. But it looks pretty good and seems pretty sizable for a debut game from a new studio based in Taiwan. But there are some places where the budget is apparent, and that's specifically in things like cinematics and also like voices. The voice acting is, again, fine. It's English. And a lot of the dialogue is given just through like your character model speaks to another character model and just like through text boxes at the bottom. There's no like cinematics. There's not even a whole lot of like art. You know, pretty like bare bones stuff. But that's, you know, I kind of accept that for like the scope of the game. It's fine. It's just not going to have like a lot of, you know, choreographed scenes or cut scenes at all, really, or things like that. And also, it's the type of game where only like some main story like dialogues are voiced, and there's a lot of unvoiced dialogue. Even things that are like significant quests or even some story moments are just not voiced. So there's some things like that where it's like, okay, this is an indie game with a limited budget. So you kind of have to go into the game if you decide to play it with sort of that, you know, mindset. But otherwise, you know, it's actually, I'm going to, at this point, I don't know if this is high praise or not. I'm going to say this is a halfway decent game. It's like, it's better than I expected. I kind of want to see where it goes from here.
Steel Rising?
It's about on the same level. Steel Rising has definitely got more budget behind it and a lot more polish, and it looks better, like in terms of visual fidelity. I feel like this game is one of the things I didn't like about Steel Rising was the environments in Steel Rising. They kind of blend together. There's a lot of Parisian streets where you're just kind of like, what street am I on? Where am I? Where am I going? And you even get the little way markers to help you out. This game, you don't get a map. There are no way markers. So like, but I feel like this game does a better job in like its area design in terms of like landmarks and, you know, vistas and things where you kind of know where you are just based on the environment, and there's not a whole lot of seamy areas for the most part. There's like a cave area that gets a little bit worse, but like the city streets and things like that. And here, I almost feel like I have a better sense of where I'm going, even without way markers or a mini map or things like that. The combat is fun. It's not like super in depth, but there's a fair bit of flexibility in terms of like I'm going sword and shield and hammer are the two weapons I chose to go with. Sword and shield because I like being able to block, and there's some cool charges you can do with that. And hammer is kind of like my damage dealing weapon. And I haven't even messed around with like the spear or the gloves. You can be a punch girl if you want, which that's always fun. But I haven't really messed with it, so I think it's, you know, it's pretty good. I want to see where it goes from here, but it's definitely not a bad game. And, you know, I don't know. I think it's longer than I expected it to be, and I wonder if I'll run into the problem of it feeling like too long, like not, you know, stretching out what content is there. But we'll see. I'm about 10 hours in right now. I'm not, and based on the in-game, like there's like an in-game log that kind of tells you like how many things you've done. It seems like I'm roughly halfway through, maybe a third of the way through. So maybe like 20, 25, 30 hours. I'll see. I'll follow up on this next week, I guess. Go ahead.
You did mention that like one of the news bits that we have later that we'll just introduce now is they did release a gameplay overview trailer, which was basically my first real extended look at the game, actually paying attention to it. Like I know I've read this game in a headline before, but I'll be honest, it was kind of, there's been enough going on this year that's kind of in one year out the other. And then when you obviously describe this as a Souls-like, and again, or Souls-light. And again, I know that's just almost unavoidable these days. But when I watch this, the two, like, I start thinking like it almost looks Zelda-ish or Darksiders-ish. Do you get that feeling at all? I guess you haven't played Darksiders.
I didn't really mention how the game looks other than the Greco-Roman style. It's got like a slightly stylized art style to it where they're not realistic. It's not anime style. It's not cel-shaded, but you know, the characters have like slightly bigger heads and shoulders than, you know, actual human proportions and things like that. So it's got like a slightly cartoony style to it, which maybe is reminiscent of something like, I don't know, World of Warcraft or Darksider, excuse me. So it kind of feels like that. You kind of joke that if you looked at this game at a glance without knowing anything else about it, it sort of might feel like one of those fake games you see on CSI or whatever, which is fair, I guess. But I think it works pretty well. You know, I think going for a fully realistic style, especially for like an indie studio making a game like this,
I think it looks.
I wouldn't be worth it anyways. Visually. And the stylization is, I think, you know, works well anyway. So
I think it looks inherently more visually appealing than Steel Rising. I know you said in Steel Rising looks, has a better like environment.
Yeah, I mean better fidelity, but it's the art style that's very different.
Yeah, I prefer this art style much more based on the combat overview trailer or the gameplay overview trailer. So
it sounds like it's like a really solid foundation as like the dev team's like first release game, and I think that's getting those fundamentals down is pretty key. Like just starting out and seeing that it's like hearing that it's decent and like there's not really like they clearly didn't like go overstep their bounds and like try to work with like a scope that they couldn't handle. It seems like a very just like a solidly packaged game, and of course like whatever their next work will be, they'll like take lessons away from like this like debut project.
Yeah, the last thing I'll mention is that this game was developed in Taiwan. I believe the developer's Taiwanese. I'm kind of doubting myself now that I'm saying it. But there are points in the game where I feel like the localization to English isn't great. Not necessarily in like the voice dialogue, but in some of like the other text throughout like the UI and whatnot. Like just one kind of random example. I know this might not sound that weird, but you go to like open a door that's locked and it says like this door needs to be opened from another side. And that just seems weird to me. Like, why don't you just say the other side rather than another side? And there's other bits like that too. Where it's just like it's not wrong, but it just kind of feels a little bit weird. So,
and by the way,
otherwise,
the game studio is Taiwanese.
Okay, I just was. That's what I thought, but as soon as I said it, I'm like, I hope I'm not wrong. So okay, but yeah, I'll right now decent. I'll see where it goes from here.
Sometimes decent is actually like take your victories where you can, because so this week I was kind of between games. I did get a Steam Deck in, which I guess now you can get those without queuing for deliveries. You can just order them. And they also announced like the Steam Deck dock officially. So I got my Steam Deck. The first game I was going to play on it was I was thinking of grabbing Soul Hackers 2, but they announced an update upcoming for that I want to wait for. So I was not sure what to play, but there was another indie game that came out in late September that I wanted to try. And it is called The Outbound Ghost. And this is a game that is very clearly and unashamedly built in the style of a Paper Mario RPG. They even like in one of the trailers call it like a paper RPG adventure. It's kind of silly that that's a genre, because like unlike Paper Mario, unlike Paper Mario games where they explicitly say like this is based on stickers or origami, or like, they just don't explain why it's paper. It just is. That's just the art style. Similar to Bug Fables, and Bug Fables is a game where, if you've been listening to this podcast a long time, is a game that I had high praise for. So I figured, hey, if Outbound Ghost is even half as good as Bug Fables, or even like Paper Mario 64, that'll be a decent game. Unfortunately, the reason why we didn't lead off with this is I feel I don't want to like. So the Outbound Ghost is a mostly a single project or a single developer project, and I never want to like criticize too heavily on a passion project like that, but I just really didn't enjoy it much at all. It's not a game I can recommend really to anyone. If you want to play, if you've already played Paper Mario 64 or The Thousand Year Door and Bug Fables, and you want to get more games in the same style, and you've been looking at the Outbound Ghost, I don't recommend that you play it. So the Outbound Ghost, yeah, it's high praise. So the Outbound Ghost, basically you play as a amnesiac ghost in the city of Outbound, and everyone here has recently died due to a combination of a poisoned water supply and a serial killer. And most of the inhabitants of this town have passed on into the afterlife, but a small smattering of villagers are like bound to this world because they have like an unfulfilled burden of some sort, or basically they have something kind of very typical ghost. Something is leashing them to the mortal plane, preventing them from ascending on. And basically, that's kind of the theme of the game. It's just like it's not really a narratively like overarching story, but more just like individual subplots about different characters and why they aren't able to proceed into the afterlife. So you end up in the town of Outbound as a ghost, and you have amnesia. And you're for me, the main character's default name was Beepo, but I think it's randomized. I'm not sure. So just the main character has amnesia, and they're like, "Oh, you're not from here, but these things happen, but we don't have a lot of strong memories of our mortal selves." And then you kind of go through, and the narrative. I've never seen a game with so much dialogue meander to such an extent that it barely pushes the plot forward. It's almost hard to describe. There is so much chatter and talking and back and forth and quipping, but nothing moves the plot. It's just entirely like spinning its wheels. So the first chapter of the game is basically there's basically 3 major chapters to this game. In the first chapter of the game, you're playing as this amnesiac ghost, mostly just kind of like getting your bearings, and you meet a pair of characters named Michael and Mary, and they're like, "Oh, you have amnesia? Well, we also have this friend named Adrian who also has amnesia. Why don't we like get you two to meet so that we can kind of figure out what's going on? Maybe you guys, can kind of put your minds together and figure out kind of what's happening." It's very like if this is hard to follow, it's hard to follow when you're playing the game too. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And then you meet Adrian, and Adrian just starts running away from you. Like he just doesn't seem to want to chatter with you at all. And so the first like 6 hours of this game is just a goose chase in a linear fashion, just you chasing after this guy who's running away from you for reasons you don't know. Then all of a sudden, you start playing the game from the perspective of Mary and Michael, and the main character is now a side character and starts speaking again and doesn't have amnesia anymore. It doesn't make any sense. These two characters, Mary and Michael, there is so much inane chatter between them because they're brother and sister. It's like a B plot of almost like a CSI show, like Adam said, where they're trying to like, one's like an investigator and one's just worried about the well-being of her brother, Mary is. And then eventually, this is the part that made me like roll my eyes and realize that this game wasn't a good game. They're trying to discuss with each other what each other's burdens are and why they haven't been able to ascend. And I shit you not, this is the resolution to this like B tier arc. Mary's like, "I haven't been able to ascend, Michael, because I've been worried about you." And then Michael is like, "Mary, I haven't been able to ascend because I'm worried about you." Oh, so then they both just ascend at the same time and just like go, "See you later, losers." And they both just leave the story. And nothing has progressed on the main narrative about the murder mystery or the poisoned water or anything. You just spent like hours with these characters, and then they just say like, "Oh, we don't want to be here anymore. Bye." There is no like resolution or narrative arc of any kind.
So putting aside main narrative, you've already kind of touched on this. Any of the chatter because sometimes you might have chatter between characters that doesn't push a plot forward, but is like good character writing or character building. It doesn't sound like that's the case here.
Well, yeah. If that last example wasn't clear enough, yeah, it's strange. And then, okay, so maybe a little bit. So, okay, maybe the game has a boring, hard to follow story. Maybe it's fun to play. Maybe that's all you need.
I mean, Bug Fables, for instance, like I kind of remember the Bug Fable story, but mostly the characters and the gameplay for that one are outstanding. Story is decent, but it wasn't like the main draw to me.
Yeah, so in Outbound Ghost, and I don't want to I'll try to keep this a little bit brief because I don't want to just spend 15-20 minutes just bagging on this game, but the main combat is very Paper Mario-esque, and you have a group of almost like Pokemon, only they're called figments, and these figments represent like different emotions, like one's like camaraderie and one's like passion or something like that. They're all based on like general ideas of like mental well-being, and some of them are like better at healing, some of them are better at being doing like debuffs or poisons or things like that. Some are tanky. They all have like different archetypes that they fill, and these figments you kind of unlock throughout the game. Some are main story, some are on off the beaten path. The only thing about them is that they have no character, they don't speak, they don't interact with the story in any way except for combat. So they're just basically a piece of artwork and a set of skills, which you might say, okay, maybe that's all you need. The characters that are interacting in the story and the things that you battle with in combat are so divorced from each other. It just feels really strange. Like there is no like cohesiveness between them. And then outside of combat and story, there is almost nothing else. There's no like shopkeeping. There's no questing. There's no like dungeons. There's even like mini games. The only mini game there is like a lockpicking mini game, which is what's that board game or where you have to like move cars out of a parking lot to you can slide them back and forth on tiles.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know the exact like name of the game, but I know exactly which one. Like it's like a
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you also have like different games that have like a mini game like that as a puzzle.
Yeah, so there is a lockpicking. There's a lockpicking minigame that's like that. Only it's like brain dead easy. Like there'll be a lock on the left side of the map, one block in the way, and then your key on the right side of the map. So you have to like move the block down and then move to the key from the right to the left, and then you've unlocked the door. Good job.
Oh,
like,
shit.
Oh, I'm so smart.
He's so talented.
The overworld exploration, there's like giant maps that you almost always progress through in a linear fashion. And your character moves really slowly, and you have like a dash button that gives you like a short burst of speed that I was just sitting there just like spamming the heck out of because you just move so slow relative to the size of the maps. The maps are just littered with enemies that you just run into. Very, very typical like Paper Mario where you run into the enemy, it brings up a combat screen. And then between each map, there's a little bit of a story beat. So like the progression of the gameplay and the narrative is very basic and bare bones. It never
you basically just like move from like dialogue sequence to dialogue sequence, basically in some sort of linear fashion, and that's the story or that's the game structure. Okay.
And then like there's never really any reason to revisit maps. I guess there's tiny reasons, like you get the ability to like leap over fences and things like that, so you can kind of go back and get other stuff. And in terms of there's no like there is like standard levels, like you get the experience that levels up your basic stats. You can like get items to like craft equipment to put on your figments, which again are the things you fight with. But a lot of these are just kind of basic, like have 10% more power, have 15% more health, things like that. Sometimes there's a little bit of trade-off, like have 0 power but do tons of stun damage. So basically it ends up being something that doesn't do damage but can stun enemies whenever they hit. So there's some interesting ideas there. It just doesn't come together. The final thing is that the game just feels unfinished. So by the time you get to the end of the game, it doesn't really answer a lot of questions at all. It doesn't answer like why these people had amnesia, how the water was poisoned. And the thing is that the story and the information conveyed in it is so poorly told that maybe it revealed it and I was just like too dumb to understand it, but I also don't feel like it was conveyed in a good fashion. In the very last arc of the game, you play as the character Adrian. This is the character that I mentioned, like starts running away from the player character at the start of the game. Only this is going to be hard to explain, but when you play as Adrian, you play as a snippet of story about 20 minutes long. Then you go back in time. Then you play another snippet of the story about 20 minutes long. Then you go back in time again as you like relive his memories, basically traversing through the narrative of the game from the end to the beginning. And then once you do that, you hit the credits, game over. Like, and it just, this is one of the games where like, as soon as I hit the credits, I was just like befuddled, like what happened? And not in like a good way or in like a way that actually leaves you like, with a poignant feeling or a feeling like a bittersweetness. I was literally just like bewildered, just confused.
And yeah, go ahead. I don't know what I'm going to say. This sounds very
I feel
strange.
I feel like I'm explaining this game poorly, but it's also like true to my experience playing the game, is that you just hop from character to character. The narrative like irks and turns and curves in ways that don't make sense and are hard to follow. The game is just dreadfully boring. I do have one good thing to say. Like compared to Bug Fables and even like Paper Mario games, I think this game looks nice. I don't know if it was built in Unity or what, but the art is good. The performance is fine. Like the effects are good. So it's a pretty game. So I guess it does have that going for it. That's kind of it. I kind of regret playing it. Very rarely do I play a game and regret that I spent time on it, but on this one I just kind of did. I'm like, I could have done anything. I could have played Cold Steel 4, but I didn't. I played this instead. So I wish it was better. But if you played, like I said, Paper Mario or Bug Fables and you're looking for another RPG, just keep waiting. Just don't play this. I feel bad saying that, but it was hard to enjoy and hard to follow and even hard to talk about. It doesn't make sense. It feels unfinished. It's more like a collection of ideas than a coherent product more than anything. So that's the Outbound Ghost.
Did the developer create like any other games besides this? Is this their debut project? I'm unfamiliar.
As far as I understand, this is their debut project.
Okay.
Well, I mean, at least their debut project that has a publisher. Like they might have released like an RPG Maker game, on the side before, but this is the first one as a studio.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully
So
there's the lessons learned, whatever they decide to do next. But yeah, it seems rough.
yeah, every year I try to play a couple indie games because usually you do find some diamonds in the rough, or not even indie games, but just games outside my wheelhouse. Like in January, I played the Expeditions Rome game, which I actually ended up enjoying a lot. I was reminded of that when Adam was talking about Asterigos. So I went out on a limb here for Outbound Ghost and didn't pan out this time. Oh well, that's life. Wish I had more nice things to say about it, but it is what it is.
How's the music?
Not memorable. Like I can't pull a tune to my head. So
that was one thing. Another thing about Bug Fables is that it had great music, like surprisingly great.
Yeah. So, a game is not very good when we're spending more time talking about Bug Fables than the game I was actually talking about. But that's how it works here.
Yep.
So to wrap up our games talk section here at the start of the podcast, we had a couple people on the cast go revisit some other games from previous years, at least in some short snippets. So it kind of ends up being like the theme of the week that we're just kind of poking around some of our interests that we've had on the back burner before getting into the major releases coming up. The next thing that I have listed here are some things that Josh has been playing that he just wanted to offer some brief thoughts on. And I'll go ahead and just hand it off to you because I don't know which of these you want to talk about primarily or first.
Sure. So last week I talked about some initial impressions on Kurono Kiseki 2. I did finish that. Well, I finished watching my friends play through from beginning to end, and I won't share my overall thoughts here. It's kind of those weird things that it's probably going to be too borderline spoiler filled to make it, to construct a coherent thought out of it. So I don't want to ruin that for people. I'll just say that I vastly prefer the first Kurono Kiseki over the sequel, and for a lot of reasons. So I was digging around. I was like, okay, what do I want to actually play next? And I was like, I wanted to take a break from RPGs. To be honest, I was like I've been playing a lot of RPGs in the past few months. Like going back Xenoblade 3, Digimon Survive, Dio Field, Valkyrie, and so on. I was like, I kind of want to not play RPG. So then just for the past few weeks, I've been messing around with Gundam Evolution, which is that Overwatch Gundam game.
Are you a new type yet?
No, I'm gradually playing it here and there, but either people are good, or sometimes there's the obvious hacker, or some and because I suck. Any number of those factors, but it's fun playing either solo or with friends. That's been a good time either way. So I played here and there, but I'm I'm not sure what I'm in the mood for. So I'm I wanted to get away from RPGs for a bit, only to play more RPGs, which is maybe a bad problem to have. So one of the RPGs I started playing, I'll probably just gradually play through it, not try to play through it all in one go. I started Labyrinth of Refrain, Coven of Dusk. Let's
fucking go.
That's the first person dungeon crawler that Nisa put out several years ago. Because the spiritual successor, Labyrinth of Galleria, is coming out in a few months, and James is a very, 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 very big fan of that. So I was like, I want to play through Refrain first, even though it's not necessary or mandatory to go to Galleria. I was like, I'm that kind of person that likes to go through these in a order if something came out first. So I'm only still in the first dungeon, but almost done with it. I think I'm at the final door to that dungeon. But it's an interesting experience so far because what I have several friends who beat that game. It's definitely have someone with you before you start that game, because I want to at least fill you in on some stuff. So I had one of my friends kind of coach me through the very beginning of that game, because when it does the setup for the game and then you get to a character creator, and then he's explaining the lucky system, because that there's a luck stat to everyone in that game, and it's and the formula for it is kind of convoluted. And he's when you start creating a character, you're given a name, or you can name a character and then a nickname for a character. And he's you want to name your characters Lucky. I'm like, what? He's yeah, if you he's like basically when you give a character a name, like it'll have like a random luck stat if you like give them like a custom name, like But if you name them lucky, they'll have like a higher like there's like a base stat luck seed if you name that lucky. So like they'll get like a stat of like luck stat of 85, but it's never like conveyed to you through that. Conversely, if you name them unlucky, they'll have a lower luck stat. And when you name them lucky and have this like high luck stat, like at the beginning, it'll be like easier for you or more pleasant because like your characters will crit more often and they won't get critted as much. Inversely, if you name them unlucky, they'll get crit. The enemies will crit them more often. You'll barely get any crits on enemies. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. They're like, yeah, and I'm like, okay. And then they're explaining more of like the systems of like when you're creating a character, like just like okay, like when you pick like a skill, like you can basically like learn a skill that would be much farther later on, and you learn them through leveling. You can like learn one of those skills right away. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And they're like explaining like each of the classes, like base classes, like strengths and weaknesses to me. I'm like, okay. And then I was like, what's this lucky number? And they're like, oh boy, okay. So, and then they were talking about like how you can like for the lucky number when you're creating a character in this game, you can pick between 0 to 99, and then people have mapped out, how this lucky number works, where the last digit on like any of those lucky numbers. So let's say like 11. Like the number you care about is 1 in that, and that last digit will inform you of how of a character's alterations to their luck stat when like you effectively like rebirth them, and so they will have a new luck stat when you rebirth them, and that's based on their lucky number, and if they like go over like a certain luck stat, like say they go over the luck 99, they will relapse back into like 0 to 1 luck. And like they'll be unlucky then. And how you mitigate that is through unlucky items you get throughout the game to like kind of mitigate that unlucky stat alteration. And I'm like, okay. All I could do is nod my head when they were explaining this in much more detail. And then so I was just basically like, I feel like I need like a certain IQ to like play this game. It's not too bad, but it does matter like at least getting an idea of like where your luck stat is in the game, because it does like factor into like several like challenges you face in the game. So but I was getting familiar with like the like the narrative flow of the game, and like how obviously there's a dungeon crawler, and like one of the big things about this game is like your main quote unquote main character story wise, like you're like this grimoire, like this cursed like book, almost very powerful book, and like you can summon like these puppets to go navigate this dungeon, and at certain points when you fulfill like certain conditions in the dungeon, like going this far or triggering a certain event in the dungeon, you go out back up to the surface and like continue like the main story and see the story events. And like I didn't know what to expect out of the story of this game, but like early on, like it's already very interesting with like what the
what do you think of Dranya so far?
Dranya seems very cruel but very amusing. There was this, I already forgot the name, but I met this nun early on with an eye patch, and I'm like, and like her introductory scenes with her, and like how like the setup for this character, it's like this game is wild. It's very it's something. I
know some people who this is speaking more broadly, where it feels like there's like sometimes a philosophical difference where if a main character isn't likable, then they are a bad character.
No,
Dranya is not necessarily likable. I disagree with that completely. Yeah. Dranya, at least at first, is definitely not likable, but I think she's interesting.
She's meant to not be likable at first. And it's one of those things where it's like, as you get further along and you learn more about her backstory, it's like it doesn't justify.
Yeah, but you learn more about like who she is as a person and why she is this way. And like that's interesting to me. Is she a likable character? No, but I don't think that's like a requisite to be, a good character.
Yeah,
even if they're the protagonist. And I think that's just interesting. I think she's very interesting.
I really like flawed, broken like main characters, because like it gives me something to think about as like as like the story goes on and you learn more about them, and then you think about like past scenes of like, okay, did they like give like interesting context clues throughout your journey to like make the payoff for this character worth it? And I think that to me that's a very interesting like journey to have. They don't have to be like a saint or like be the devil, like make them like a interesting character, but like making me think about like why a character does something like it is generally signs of like something that I'll enjoy, not something that I'll just take at face value. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've been poking away at that. It seems very fun. I know it'll very much expand later on. I imagine I only have like there's these things called packs in the game, and I know at a certain point I'll start like uncovering new packs that'll get more and more and more characters into my party. Right now, I just have like standard like 5 or 6 characters in my party with like one support in a backline, and I'm sure that will expand to like a crazy amount. I like I'm. It has a lot of like I guess I'm kind of itching for a new Etrian Odyssey the more I play this game too. But it's been fun enough, and it does have like interesting mechanics to it that like they introduced early on. Like you have like the ability to like break walls early on, and then so like it gives like a new element of exploring and kind of making it more a little bit threatening as well. Because sometimes you break a wall, it's just like a pit like there, and it's like, oh, you can just like fall down and like you're almost dead, and so it makes exploring the dungeon more interesting and more intense in a certain fashion. So I'm really looking forward to um playing more of that. I appreciate. I don't know if this was like launched with it, but like there was like a 4K textures option in the game. When I'm playing this on PC, I'm like, oh, thank God there's this option because it makes the game a lot more crisp with that texture pack on. So that's been fun. And I also started and finished Voice of Cards: The Isle Dragon Roars. That's the first Voice of Cards game. Because like there's been 3 of these games out. I'm like, if I like, I should probably start this series at least a little bit because like who knows if they're just gonna continue piling more and more Voice of Cards games, and I don't want to be so far behind that it seems daunting to like kind of quote unquote catch up. Even though you don't really need to like play these in order, or you don't need to like start from here and play or end here or whatever. I know like all are standalone to some extent, but I want to like see this like once again all the way through from like what released first to what was most released. So this is like a much shorter game. This took me like a little over 15 hours in general. Um, and this is like this is most associated like the Yoko Taro as a creative director project. It's like the tabletop RPG, like everything's done with cards. And then there's and like as you uncover the world, you like flip over more cards that like uncover the world. So like everything is like built on like cards and is very much inspired by traditional tabletop RPGs. Um, the first Voice of Cards is very simple, and I'd say like simple and serviceable. Pretty much sums up my thoughts of that game. It's a very simple story of like, hey, you're just a hero who wants to get rich because like they have their own reason. They're kind of like a greedy person at the start, but like there's this queen that says whoever slays this dragon will like get riches from us, and that's kind of the main premise of like there's a dragon that's been supposedly ravaging the land, and you can hear its roars throughout the land. So like you and like the party members that you come across like just visit, like kind of travel around the world, visit towns, go on like these quests and storylines until like you confront the dragon, and so forth. So that's kind of
even though it's a pretty simple story, and I'm saying twist is maybe too generous, but I kind of like how the story kind of turns, in the last chapter of it, and like, oh, here's what's actually going on.
Yeah,
like, it's simple, but it's like, oh, that's actually kind of a pretty nice kind of conflict that we have here, and how it actually wraps up.
Yeah, I think that I think the actual like overall like what the nature of this journey entails is interesting. I don't think like a lot of like the story beats are like that. Like I said, it's simple and serviceable, but not too like super interesting on like face value. Like a lot of like the party members that like join you along, like the one from the forest and the son. Actually, I like the one that's like the son of like the alchemist. I like him, but they don't have like much depth to them as a character. But I'm like, that's okay. Like they're fine. There's a bare bones reason, but it's like it's good enough to like kind of string them along. There's not like a lot of there's not like a big like heartfelt scene that like reaffirms everyone's bonds with each other. It's a very simple story, and that's okay.
It also meanders a bit.
It does, yes, it does meander. Though, like you're left wondering like who the hell is Mar? Like, what is like the nature of Mar? And then once you find more about Mar, which is like your monster companion, at the very start, it's like oh. So that like as you would expect, like from a game that like has Yoko Taro involved in it, like there is definitely twists along the way. I think it's weird. It's weird that like there's this whole component to it that like if you beat enough like monsters, you'll get like the monster story for that enemy, or if you like you do fulfill certain conditions, like you rest like at every end, you get like this other backstory, like simple like maybe 3 to 4 sentences of like more of this character. It's kind of like quote unquote like the flip side to them, like showing like maybe a more darker side, or like a more providing more context for that.
That almost feels like card game-ish too, where like the back of a card might have like a trading card might have like a very short, like 2 or 3 sentences, like here's what this character is and what they did, and maybe a little bit of their history, all in 3 sentences. So it kind of has that. So
I think that the final boss had like interesting, like at least it's like I think for the most part the game is very like even simple in gameplay. Like I had a very like solid strategy that I only needed to like switch up at the final boss, because the final boss actually had like mechanics that I wish was more prevalent throughout the other throughout the game's other like bosses that it had. Like I wish more of the bosses were like involved as the final boss in this game, because that was the only time I was like, okay, I need to think about like the composition of my party and what skills am I bringing to this encounter.
It's pretty easy.
Yeah. Other than that, like my strategy was like the main character, the elf girl with the bow and arrow.
Yeah, I used the bow girl and the I actually forget who my 4th character was. The muscle guy? I don't know.
Yeah, it's only 3 characters, and like I had Melanie, which is the mage girl that also tries to at the beginning. So like, and I just had like a really solid like strat of just like really focusing on like the multi-hitting attacks that both the elf girl and the main character had, while Melanie is more like a battery to like supply mana to them. So that like it's neat, it's I installed and shortly booted up the second game, the Forsaken Maiden, last night. I don't know if like I'm gonna commit fully to it yet, or maybe I'll just like continue to play more other games. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in going into it now with like this like knowledge foundation from the first voice of cards. I didn't know that you hold Forsaken Maiden in high regard, and like relative to other voice of cards games. So I'm interested to like kind of dig deep into that and seeing like what sorts of like gameplay differences it may have, and what sorts of like just in general like now like I can like more easily spot the differences or enhancements to the game, like like just coming fresh off of the first game. But yeah, I mean it's a really like I like smaller RPGs, so like it's totally fine that like it didn't last long for me, or like it was more in the simple but side. Like I kind of just like enjoy just like, okay, that was a neat like 10 to 15 hour experience, and like it wasn't like a masterpiece, but that's totally fine. I just like playing to these kinds of games. So that's we'll see. Other than that, that's all I've been really playing for right now, as I'm waiting for more like bigger releases this month. I just do want to give a PSA as well that the Legend of Mana TV anime adaptation did start at the time of this recording, like yesterday, and that's a really cool first episode for Legend of Mana fans. Like there's like little details here and there. It's like, oh, that's funny that they included this in the show. Like it starts.
I'm probably not going to watch this until it's all done. Yeah. I heard in the first episode the pumpkin guy beats up Lapis Lazuli or whatever his name is.
Yeah. Duel like is kind of a giga chat in it. He like beats up Elysium like in the first encounter. Like it's funny. Like it starts right after the Shiloh brings what was it, Bud and Corona back to his place.
Her name is Lisa.
Sorry, Lisa.
I'm joking. Her name was changed for some reason.
Yeah, right. Because the subs call them by their Japanese names, so it's Corona in the English subs.
Well, I could probably see why they changed the name.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's basically at the start of the game, a little after like you bring those kids back to your place, and yeah, it's really funny because like at the very like how they reference like the how Shiloh meets them and like their initial encounter is as Shiloh is about to go downstairs, Lil Cactus gets up on its feet and like gets a chair and writes in the little leaflet notepad, and like as it's writing on that leaflet note, the flashbacks to Shiloh like fighting against them and like beating them up for like
Well, that's what happens in the game. Is they're
yeah
they're just kind of being like troublemakers in the pumpkin patch, and then you beat them up, and they're like,
yeah
"Sorry, we'll go with you."
yeah. So it's a really nice touch, and I think so far like it really captures like the whimsical tone of Legend of Mana. Like I'm watching with a friend that's never played Legend of Mana, but he was just like kind of laughing that like kind of like stuff just kind of happens in that show, like in the episode. It's like this is very much how it is like in the game. Like the stuff just kind of you walk around and stuff just kind of happens in front of you, and you won't know the context for a while of why like some certain things like are happening in front of you.
I do
Well,
like
that's it
how
for
we've
now.
had a few different contexts to speak about anime projects over the last 3 weeks. Gundam, Edge Runners, and now Legend of Mana.
Mhm.
And
There's also
once
for the
those
Cold Steel one.
Oh yeah, we got the Cold Steel one. Once the
Mhm.
Dragon Quest Dai game comes out, we'll be able to tie into that manga and anime property, of course. I guess
2 more
One Piece game.
episodes. Yeah,
Start having a One Piece marathon.
Yeah, for Dragon Quest Nine, there's 2 more episodes before it completely finishes. Like I got caught up. I'm excited.
Wow.
Things are happening.
I hear you have to watch all 1,000 One Piece episodes before you can play One Piece Odyssey.
Maybe not all 1,000, but based on the news we'll talk about today, you might want to watch a certain number of them, or at least read a synopsis. You can also read the manga. Reading is allowed too.
Yeah.
Manga would be a lot quicker. A lot quicker.
Well, I just saying that for that little One Piece news bit, I had to be like, Adam, I want you to do it because I don't know what I'm going to be talking about.
It's kind of backwards from what we normally get.
Josh doesn't know what a bond clay is.
I don't know. And Adam like disciplined me like a few weeks back. He's like, "Why did you say Nico? It's Robin." I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry."
No one calls her Nico.
But isn't her name Nico Robin?
Yes, but no one calls her Nico.
Yeah, I wrote Nico in the news bit for that One Piece one a weeks back, and then Adam was like, slapped me on the wrist.
Monkey D. Luffy, but no one calls him Monkey.
That's true. See, he does make a good point there.
I can't believe you're not up to date on One Piece.
I don't even watch One Piece, and I know that nobody ever calls her Nico. They only call her Robin.
This is how out of touch I am with the One Piece.
Wow, I can't believe you're just an anime neophyte. Just
yeah, I hate anime, to be honest.
I'm sorry, they had a One Piece collaboration with Grand Blue at one point, and I skipped all their story scenes.
All right, so more on One Piece later, but no, thanks for just the check-in on a few different things that you've been looking at with Voice of Cards, with the Legend of Mana anime, and with Labyrinth of Refrain. Well, obviously more news on Labyrinth of Galleria coming out next year. So we've kind of preempted a lot of our news. So it'll be interesting once we get to that section here. The final thing that we're going to do in this games talk section at the start here is Chow reminded me about something that was announced last month that I completely forgot about. And that was that Radiant Silvergun released on Switch in September. Now, Chow, I need a little bit of a history lesson here. Like Radiant Silvergun, when I see that name, I'm like, oh yeah, that's a classic game from back in the day, but I don't know like what it is or why it's interesting. So you've been playing Radiant Silvergun on Switch. Just kind of give me like the lowdown on what even is this?
Okay, so Radiant Silvergun is a shoot 'em up game by Treasure, and Treasure also made Ikaruga. It's actually kind of like RPG, to be honest with you, because there's a leveling up system with your shots, and there's actually a very deep story in this game too. So basically, that's kind of like a rundown, and it even has music from Hitoshi Sakamoto, and you know that he did music for Final Fantasy Tactics. So this game sounds like FF Tactics when you play through the game with the music, right?
There we go. The core tenets of RPG all represented: level ups, deep story, Hitoshi Sakamoto.
Yep, it got everything in there. So, anyways, they released a Switch port of this game, just kind of like recently. The Switch port is sort of like a port of the 360 live arcade version. If anyone remember that. That was released quite a while ago.
I do vaguely remember they had like a big shmup release spree like on the Xbox Live days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it's actually like a good port in my opinion, but apparently like very experts in the scene said just go with the Sega Saturn version because apparently there's a little input lag compared to the Sega Saturn version from
So that's a shame. Like that actually seems like I can see why that might be a bummer because having it like input lag like on a shmup is kind of a killer.
But from what I heard, it's from 3 frames, which is what the Sega Saturn version is, and the Xbox Live version is 4 frames, and this one is 5 frames.
Ooh, okay.
If 5 frames is enough to kill your mood of these kind of games, then don't get the Switch port. I guess.
Hopefully they like either like fix that in a like later patch, hopefully down the line, and or like have it released on other platforms that like have less input lag. Ideally they do all the above,
but yeah, I don't know. But anyways, this game is extremely good. It has a scoring system too, just like Ikaruga, but it's a little different than Ikaruga. Instead of like shooting like free back to back, how it goes is that you have to shoot enemies that come in a certain color, right? They come in either red, yellow, or blue. So you get a bonus points if you shoot 3 of the same color. And then you got to keep sticking with killing those patterns if you want the maximum score. You want to play that way. Basically, and there's also another secret way of shooting to get the chain bonus is by hitting all different colors from red, 1 yellow, then blue, or something like that.
You don't. You're not mandated to do this. It's more of like a point. If you're point focused,
if you're point focused, there's a scoring system how it goes, right?
Yeah.
What's really cool about this game is that because the story is told non-chronicle order, so you actually start in stage 3, then you kind of go back to stage 1. Then at the end of the game, you end up at stage 0. So that's how because of the story goes.
I remember it being really funky, but yeah, it's been a long time for me.
But
sounds like Outbound Ghost.
Yeah, it has a pretty deep story. Basically, what happened is that humanity find this kind of like this crystal-like objects, and it basically kills every humanity in the world. And the reason why you're still alive because you were at a space station in space, and you come back to Earth to get resources because you ran out of resources in space. And that's why the game is told in kind of like this non-chronological order. And by the end of the game, the crystal object sends you back all the way to the BC times. And that's why it's stage 0. So that's kind of how it works. And I don't know, it has this really cool time loop part of the plot, but I don't think people play shoot 'em up games for the plot usually.
No, not really.
So yeah, I would say check it out. It is an extremely difficult game.
Did they include like anything unit or does it like support like Tate mode on Switch?
The thing is, this game was never a Tate mode game.
Oh yeah, okay. I thought it was for a second. Yeah, that's right. It was more widescreen.
Yeah, Silvergun's one of the few.
What
games
is Tate mode?
It's basically if you play shoot 'em up games, the screen ratio is 3:4. If you get what I'm saying, basically
it's like having it's like you're standing or like for Switch, like you would flip the Switch like sideways to make it stand up.
I was going to ask this.
Tate itself even means to stand up. So it's a way of saying it's vertical.
I was actually going to ask. Like, I remember when the Switch came out. Like, I forget who made it, but the flip grip, where it could actually like be held vertical between the Joy-Cons. Like, I was wondering, like, would that work for this game? But I guess this game isn't set up that way.
Nope, it's definitely not. The thing is,
and I'm not surprised to hear that it's difficult because I remember back in like 2016 or 15 or whenever Ikaruga came out on Steam, I was like, oh, like I don't play a lot of shoot 'em ups, but this game I've always heard was fun and challenging. Let me try it. I think I beat the first chapter and just got like stonewalled by the second chapter, just could not clear it, and I was like, I am bad. I am bad at games.
Shmups not text right there. They're hard.
It's a learning process of beating them. You try to memorize all the patterns and things. I don't know. I feel like I hate to make this kind of comparison, but in my opinion, I treat Final Fantasy 14 as a bullet hell. Even though there's not like a million bullets coming, you just have to like keep dying over and over and remember the pattern.
And I don't know. EX4 has some sections that are basically low-key a bullet hell, like an actual one.
But you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
So you just
Brian, if you ever want to get into shmups or bullet hells, I know that both. Well, actually, Josh, you did play Draenus too, right?
Yeah. I was gonna
Yeah,
recommend like if you ever like Draenus is like a really good beginner
yeah.
friendly.
It's
Shoot 'em
it's
up.
also like perfect for Steam Deck. That's how I played the whole thing, and it runs perfectly. So
Yeah, that's an awesome game.
yeah.
That
No, I'm
was
not
from
sure if I
Team
would call that
Ladybug,
a
right?
shmup. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'd call that a shmup, more like a schmideways, but you get what I mean.
We are not standardizing that term.
I mean,
but
it only makes sense. You're going from side to side. If a shmup is like top down, it's gotta work that way, right? Oh,
Logic.
I'm imagining fitting that into the podcast post somewhere. Schmideways. You heard me, Adam.
But there's also one last thing I forgot to mention. Radiant Silvergun. It's the only game that plays like this. There's actually like, what is it, 7 shot patterns that your ship can use, and each button basically corresponds with one each shot. So you got kind of like a straight shot, a shot that shoots backwards, a laser. Was it kind of like a 2 explosive spread shot, and there is kind of like a homing laser, and there is also a laser sword that you could use, which is like short range. And like there was people that bragged in the internet where they beat the whole game using just the sword only without using the shots. So stuff like that. It's
I
pretty
forgot
cool.
what like in that game, was it all button sensitive or was that preset that you did for
It's
those?
preset
Okay.
basically. Because Radiant Silvergun used to be for the arcades, right? So if
Yeah.
you play in the arcades, you only got 3 buttons, right?
Yeah.
So you can only do the 3 basic shots. Then if you want to do the other shots, you press a combination of 2 buttons, and then you would get the other 3 shots. Then if you press all 3 buttons, you get the sword.
Okay. Yeah, that's how they did it in arcades.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. Your sword can also absorb like pink bullets, and it fills up like this energy bar. And when you get a full energy bar, you could use this giant sword, which works like a bomb in shoot 'em up games. So
Did they add anything like any sort of like art gallery or like concept art and like in the development of this game, like in this re-release?
I don't see it there.
Okay.
So like I said, I think this is just a port of the 360 version, the live arcade version that's just on Switch. So if you already
Okay.
have that, and I don't know, maybe you still use your 360 or your Xbox, maybe then there's not much of a reason to get it. So
yeah.
Oh.
I remember that it was either free just to download or it was like an Xbox Live Gold game like a while back because I have it in my library. I don't know when I got it, but it's in my Xbox library and I've played it a bit on my Series X. So
yeah, if you're into shoot 'em up games and have RPG elements and have a pretty decent story, give this game a shot.
And that pretty much covers this for the games we've been playing section. So kind of all over the place this week, but variety is the spice of life. So thank you to everyone who contributed to that. And we'll hear more about some of the things that Adam and James have been playing in the upcoming weeks as we go into later in October. And then some of the topics now that we are going to shout out for features up on RPG site are things that we've already introduced on last week's episode of the podcast, but we'll go ahead and give their formal write-ups a little bit of a shout out here. So in the last week, James has put up 2 features, one of which is on Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak's second title update. So James had that chance to talk about that title update last week on the podcast, but he also went and wrote up his thoughts for that update and published them on the site. So if you weren't listening to last week's podcast or you're playing through the update yourself and want to see what his thoughts were on that, go ahead and give that a read. James also wrote up a little bit of a feature on, he had the chance to attend a Distance Worlds concert last week or the week before, and wrote up kind of his impressions on that. And this is your first time, was this your first time attending Distant Worlds?
Oh yeah, this is my first time. I want to say the last time they did one was 2017 or something like that. It would make sense because I imagine that they probably wanted to do something for the 30th anniversary, and that would have been the last time they had a reason to, because this is for the 35th anniversary of the series.
So that makes sense. And yeah, and obviously I don't know all the details, but I'm guessing over the last couple of years, just the number of concert events that have venues even open would have been very limited. But yeah, I've had both. I know Adam and I have both had a chance to attend Distant Worlds, and if you're at all a fan of Final Fantasy, usually it's a very, very good time. So always put that on your bucket list if you get the chance to see one. Usually it's a pretty good showing. James also, as we're talking about the features that he wrote up a preview for an upcoming game that we don't talk about a lot here, and that is for Gotham Knights. So Gotham Knights is a game that I think a lot of us kind of have an eye on, but are struggling to find a lot of, genuine excitement for. Were you able to go hands-on on this, or was this a
Yes.
behind closed doors preview event?
I was able to go hands-on. Actually had a chance to go to the Warner Brothers offices and play about 2.5 hours of the game.
That's really cool. So obviously you have the write-up up on the site on rpgsite.net for those that want to get your full rundown. But do you have just like any key takeaways that you want to kind of address here?
Yeah, not a big fan of the combat, I'll be honest. I kind of like say it in my preview where it's like, oh, well, it'll probably be better once you've got all these upgrades and you're at the end of the game and you have like more options at your disposal. But especially early on, it's just like watered down like Arkham combat. Because like in Arkham, you had like a counter. So like if you like got the little like icon above an enemy's head, you could just press the counter button and like react to it. You don't have a counter here. Instead, you have to dodge. And it's like you do get like a bonus if you evade it the perfect amount of time. It like fills up your meter. I forget if it's like, I think it's adrenaline. I don't know for sure, but that's what lets you use like special attacks. And I only got a little bit of a chance to try the co-op. And one thing that I found out later that kind of surprised me is that I assumed there was going to be full 4-person co-op. No, it's just like 2 people, even though there's 4 playable characters. I think the thing that the one takeaway that really stuck with me the most is I feel like what might be the most promising aspect of this game might be the detective sections, because there's like a whole kind of murder mystery to the game where it's like, well, Batman's dead. We need to find out what he was doing, like what he was investigating, and exactly what killed him. And like throughout the entire preview section, like in the Belfry, which is like the hub, there was like an entire just like case board that's set up, and you can at any given time like look at it, and you'll have all the different like key like suspects, witnesses, and all like on the board, and you'll have these strings connecting them as you figure things out, and like you'll even have like this dialogue that the other members of the Bat family will say while you're in the main area. And then like in missions, like in the tutorial mission, there's a little section where you have to investigate something to kind of solve a puzzle. And it's like the person that died in this section was trying to hide something, and you need to figure out, okay, what were they up to? So you investigate, you find out there's like 3 possible places you could maybe insert a code. And then there's like 4 different possible codes. So you have to like context clues, be like, okay, which code do I use and where do I put it? And it wasn't much, but I feel like that might be the thing. If I'm going to play this game, I don't know if I'm going to play it. That might be the thing that grips me the most, because I feel like we have a lot of Batman games, and like obviously like the Arkham, well, I say trilogy, but I guess there was 4 if you count. What was it? It
Origins.
Origins.
I think this game has the Origins developer team on it, if I remember correctly.
But it's like in the Arkham games, yeah, you had some investigation segments, but it really wasn't a focus. But I feel like
it almost became a meme. Like out of all the games that have like press button to highlight things, like I feel like The Witcher has it, even like Tomb Raider has it, I think. But like Detective Vision came from
and like
one of the Arkham games, and it was, and usually said like sneeringly, like not oh yeah, I love that Detective Vision from Arkham City or whatever. Usually it felt like it was kind of dumbing down the gameplay, but the way you described this detective gameplay aspect from Gotham Knights sounds a little bit more involved. So maybe they, kind of Arkham combat's kind of a well-worn thing where there's not a whole lot you can maybe do with it. But maybe they saw the detective aspect. You're playing as a superhero detective, or at least related to superhero detectives.
And I do want to stress that I feel like inherently it's really difficult to like preview an open world game, especially since like half the session was just dealing with the tutorial and the story mission. Well, more than half of it even was kind of delegated to that. So I didn't really get to have a good feel of how the open world feels, and like, is there anything there that's like unique? Because
This requires more time.
Yeah, and also like, correct me if I'm wrong, they canceled the last gen versions of this, right? Or is it just delayed and they haven't technically canceled?
They canceled the last gen versions. This was the game
Okay.
they canceled last gen versions for.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. Like, the open world stuff, I am not really sold on yet. But again, I've only seen such a small part of it. I do know there's stuff to do there. I do know that one thing they seem to do is that it looks like the way that main story missions start is it kind of introduces you to different like enemies, and then in the open world you can investigate things and find like additional missions to like finish up that specific villain's story arc, and it has like stuff attached to it. Because I do know that two of the missions I did, the first one was a story mission tied to Harley Quinn. I'm sure you guys have seen that now infamous clip.
Living La Vida Loca scene in the game.
I will say it is cringe, but in context, it's not as bad as
I imagine. It is funny to like see out of context.
Yeah, and like later on, like I did like a few like open world activities that kind of followed up on her like jailbreak, and then eventually you deal with her and like kind of put her back behind bars. So it's like, I feel like that's probably going to be something similar for the rest of the cast, especially now that the trophy list has been uploaded. You can look at it. It's like, yeah, it seems like that's what they're going with, which I think that's not necessarily a bad way of doing things, because it lets them have their story beats. And then like, if you want to follow through on the other enemies, that's like a reason to do the open world activities and whatnot. But yeah, it seems interesting, and I don't want to diminish the fact that it very much is an RPG, like in the sense that you do have levels, you have stats, you have like equipment and the skill point stuff, and the way that you can improve your character. Like, especially with the knighthood tree, it seems like even if at the beginning most of the characters feel very, very similar, I can tell just looking at what you upgrade to, and even like with the little bit of upgrades I did for the last section of the preview I had, things are going to feel very different at the end game. It's just a question of, is there a reason to really go in depth with the customization? Because they said there's supposed to be end game stuff, but I haven't seen exactly what that might be. And it's like, I don't know.
I don't know what to think of this game yet. I feel like I want to maybe check it out with friends. That's I feel like I'd have to a friend will just have to say, hey, you want to check this out, and I'll probably be like, okay, sure.
I feel like it will be a strong 7 out of 10. I feel like that's what it's kind of going for. With you, I will say it might be worth it just because it's going to have like fancy ray tracing features and whatnot, and you have a 3080, so it's like, it'll look nice. That's something.
It's a 7. It's a 7 out of 10, but it's got ray tracing.
Let me fit a 4090 somehow in here.
God, those size comparisons, like that one Asus one that's taller than a PS5, it's like, Jesus Christ. Even if I wanted that card, it wouldn't fit in my 11D. It wouldn't fit in my case.
I'm just imagining all the horror stories that people have. Like, even if they somehow like get into their PC case, like how long till it just like fucking snaps off.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they might be making huge cards, but they're not dumb. It comes with a support bracket.
Okay, all right. Well, good luck. I imagine some people are just going to install it and see how.
Or install the bracket improperly. Mm-hmm. I'm also just imagining like the fans and the heats on those. But anyways, for Gotham Knights, I'm kind of with Josh, where it's like, since it is 2-player, like any game, no matter how mid it is, like just have someone along, have someone along for the ride, someone to suffer alongside you. And maybe the game will also be surprisingly good, but even if the game is surprisingly good, even that is exemplified if you're playing with a buddy, at least in my experience. So Gotham Knights, I'm either going to play it co-op or not at all, probably.
Yeah, that's kind of feel like. All right, Ryan, time for a death pact. Let's go.
All right. I'm not agreeing to that just yet.
I'm
not committing to anything.
Well. As long as the two of you are going to play it, it's only 2-player co-op. I'm free. I'm safe.
It is kind of weird they went with a 2-player co-op. You don't really see that often, like especially in a game that like showcases more playable characters. 2-player co-op. It's like, oh, all right, weird.
I can't help but feel like that might have been a stipulation they fell into when developing the last gen versions, and it's like too late now.
Yeah.
And the last feature we have up on the site is actually a late review for the site, and that is for a game that released in June, Fire Emblem Warriors 3 Hopes. Now, this game kind of released at a very busy time period. It was like a week before Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak and only a few weeks before the July deluge of like Live Alive, Digimon Survive, and Xenoblade. So 3 Hopes kind of fell, underneath everything else. We did get a little bit of a preview from, I believe Colin did the preview for that and talked about the Switch performance on that game. But we got a review up on the site now from Nathan, who is also a very big Fire Emblem Three Houses fan, talking about his time with 3 Hopes. So we do have that up on the site as well. I am inherently not interested in the style of game in general, but it is kind of fun to read through someone who is a big Fire Emblem fan, what they thought about this spin-off, this kind of side storytelling, alternate retelling of the Three Houses story. So go ahead and give that a review if you forgot about 3 Hopes, or if you've played it but had it on the back burner, or if it's something you want to get to before the end of the year. Nathan did put up a good thorough review for that up on the site. All right, we'll head into our news section here, and kind of a big week for news, and from a lot of surprising places. We're going to open up with one that was not a lot of times when we cover news, it's like a trailer or a press release or an announcement from a Nintendo Direct or whatever. This is not that. This is something that kind of evolved over the week that genesised from a Medium post from a developer on Disco Elysium with Zaum, Z-A-U-M. And we kind of talked about this at the very tail end of the podcast last week, like as we were signing off, because it was kind of like breaking news right as we were recording last weekend. So Adam has very thoroughly kind of kept a news article updated on the site for the developments over at Zaum, Z-A-U-M, and confirming from the developer, from the horse's mouth themselves, that the talent behind Disco Elysium is no longer with the studio. That includes Robert Kurvitz, Helen Hinspear, and Alexander Rostov. And we did also get a statement from the developer stating that, like any video game, the development of Disco Elysium was a collective effort. They have no further comment other than that their focus remains on the development of their next project. So kind of a very boilerplate statement saying that the developer does still exist. They haven't shuttered their doors. They are still working on a new project. But also, got confirmation that those 3 talents are no longer with the studio. So
I feel like, and everyone I feel like that's been keeping track of this has already seen this, but saying, like many of the developers are still there while all the Estonian writers are gone. Like a big part of Disco Elysium's soul comes down to like the lived experience of being in like a post-communist society, like and whatnot. It's like
it's definitely it's not a good
not to mention that one of the people that left, it's like you can say, oh well, he's just one person, but it's like he wrote over half the words in Disco Elysium, and the setting itself is something that he's been workshopping for like 20 years.
Yeah, because like Adam mentioned last week at the tail end of the podcast that this was like forked out because ZAUM started as a collective, like an art collective of sorts, including like a novelization of which Disco Elysium was based on, and that writer is no longer with the studio. So now it's possible that ZAUM is making a project that is not tied to this universe at all. It should be kind of like the only way that I could see having any interest in what they're producing next is if it's just completely divorced from this.
I feel like, though, especially seeing some of the like individual employees and how they've reacted to folks' reactions to news, it's like, I know it's just one person, but the fact that they were trying to hide this for so long, not them, that one individual, but like the studio was trying to hide this for so long, and like the circumstances, like I'm sure like Jason Schreier is eventually going to come out with something about this because it's just ripe for, okay, what the hell actually happened? Like someone like him is going to have a big expose in like a few months. We'll probably have a much better idea of what the hell happened. But even from what we know now and from what we can very clearly see, it's yes, like any development, Disco Elysium and Zaum weren't just those three people that left, but we were also finding out it wasn't just those three people. Like much of the other talent that worked on Disco Elysium has left after them. And the current state of the company now is like nowhere near what the studio that made Disco Elysium. And it's just, I'll be blunt, trying to like that statement that they put out, and people have said this as much. It's like you really did try this with like the worst possible game to try and weasel this through, didn't you? Because any person that really got into Disco Elysium is probably going to be predisposed to just like see through that bullshit.
Yeah, that statement was basically toothless, and it's just like, please just look the other way. Don't pay attention to this. Like, it's just like a lot of these involuntary studio departures happened in like late 2021. So, like you said, they were not being open about this, and now that people, have learned about some of the, at least we only can see what has been shared with us. Like you said, it'll take some deep investigative sleuthing from someone like Schreier to actually get to the nitty gritty. So we only know what we've been exposed to, but since this happened nearly a year ago at this point, and we're just now learning about it, it's clearly not something that they were wanting to be open about. And now that people have learned about it, they're saying, please look the other way. We're still going to make a great game for you, right? That's what you're all interested in, right? We're working on our next project. But the fact that the cultural association that created the studio is now gone, and all that's left is the studio and none of the original talent behind it, it makes it just very hard to be interested in whatever they're producing next, at least inherently.
Yeah, and you got to assume, even if it's not the same world, which again cannot like overstate how much of like a loss that is, considering how much time and like blood, sweat, and tears this dude put into it. But it's like, I'm sure the original creators are going to be like, they won't have any issues whatsoever, basically, if they want to, anyways. If they want to keep making games, they won't have any issues whatsoever finding someone to give them the time and resources to make something great again. I mean, especially like look at how much like Disco Elysium sold. I don't know if we have like any specific sales numbers, but on Steam it's like over 50,000 reviews, which going by conventional wisdom, that's like 2 to 3 million copies sold just on PC, not even counting the console versions, which
the Final Cut
well
version
received as well. So it's like if they want to keep making games, I'm sure they'll be able to keep making games. It's just like such an unfortunate like situation that things have like turned out this way.
So obviously we'll keep an eye on and seeing on what ends up coming out of ZAUM going forward, or from the departures if they end up working on another project together.
It's okay. ZAUM is like that people are complaining now, but once we flash the 5-star summer event Kin Kitsuragi card, it's over.
The next major set of news we got was, I don't know if we were expecting this, but we got a whole lot of news out of CD Projekt. So, Adam, was this like planned at all? Like, I don't know if this was like a standard like reporting, or if this is something they just kind of dropped on us like all at once out of nowhere.
I think it was just an usual investor like meeting, but they kind of attached to it like, here's our roadmap for the next 10 years or whatever. So
all right, so there's a lot to dive into here, but we're going to have to like boil this out. So we already learned about the upcoming Cyberpunk expansion coming out next year, which is Phantom Liberty. We already got information on that, I think, like 3 weeks ago. However, we did learn, and perhaps unsurprisingly, that a full sequel is underway for Cyberpunk 2077. The sequel is codenamed right now Project Orion. Now, there's a lot of project names here, so I have to have all the news posts up in order to keep these straight. So Project Orion is the Cyberpunk 2077 sequel. However, interestingly, Project Orion will be developed by CD Projekt North America, a studio that the Polish company is currently in the process of founding. CD Projekt North America will consist of studios based in Boston and Vancouver. So when I read this was just really interesting because like they're
Don't
giving
they
us
already have a Boston-based studio? Because isn't that like the studio that's working on the other like spin-off that they announced?
I don't know if that's the same studio because they're calling this one CD Projekt North America, where the other one is the has a different name called what? Let's
The
see.
Molasses Flood, but it's like
Yeah.
they're based in Boston,
Also,
so it's yeah.
all right, so might need to do some sleuthing on that to see if that's the same studio working on two different projects, both Project Polaris or sorry, Project Sirius. So many project names. Anyways, trying to keep these in order. Let's focus on Project.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it could be a case where you have like they might have multiple development studios in North America. It's just an umbrella term, and then since it's going to include both Boston and whatnot, well, that the Molasses Flood is already Boston based. They would be under that umbrella as like CD Projekt North America. That would be my assumption at this point.
Yeah, so CD Projekt North America will also include the Vancouver studio. So it just kind of depends on how you label each bucket. So when I read, focusing now on Project Orion, the Cyberpunk 2077 sequel, the fact that this is a studio that they're still in the process of founding, but they're already announcing that they're working on a Cyberpunk project, just seems like almost like repeating mistakes. Because remember how Cyberpunk was announced like in 2012 with that teaser, and then we didn't hear about it at all for like 6 or 7 years until they had more to show. Like, I don't know if this is just something specifically to please investors, because Cyberpunk did sell well. Like that is a fact. So a sequel is financially a smart and safe move. So I don't know if this is more of an announcement for fans or more of an announcement for investors saying like, yep, we're working on a sequel, don't worry about the finances.
I think it's for investors primarily, for sure. I have to imagine.
Yeah, I don't think they'd announced a specific project beforehand, but they definitely said that they were anticipating Cyberpunk would be a series moving forward. So it's like not even really much new information, except for the fact that it's like, oh yeah, we're going to have X developer working on it, and that's basically what we're hearing now.
I mean, good luck. You have a lot of lessons to learn from the first release, right?
Yeah.
So it's just we'll see how it goes. I don't expect this to come into fruition for literally might be another decade.
Yeah, this is something that we might not talk about again for a long time. And it's almost like in a way it's very different from how a lot of other studios handle announcements, where we'll hear about games like we talked about how this year we learned about so many projects that ended up releasing this year, like Dio Field and Valkyria Elysium and things like that. And Nintendo has done that also as well, where they announce something one year and release it by the end of the year or the next year. So CD Projekt, it's in a way, it's kind of like refreshing to hear, yeah, we're just now incubating ideas for this, but you won't see the fruits of our labor for literally a decade.
It's very much how like the movie industry does their announcements of like upcoming projects. It's very much like far into the future. Like here's what to expect. Like say like for people like Marvel Studios, for example, they'll just lay out like here are the movies coming the next 5 years for this quote unquote phase.
Not quite the same thing, but for some reason the thing that pops in my head is like The Lion King, Mufasa. Just the thing that no one asked for.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about that Mufasa teaser thing was they announced that like who's going to be voicing Timon and Pumbaa in that movie. Like, why are Timon and Pumbaa in a Mufasa movie? He never met them.
All right,
well, you have to watch it to find out. Unfortunately, sure, of course they were going to make a sequel to Cyberpunk, and in some aspects, it is very exciting to see like they won't be shackled from the get go with the last generation of consoles. They'll definitely be focusing on like current gen tech.
Well, by the time it actually comes out.
Yeah. By the time it actually comes out, at least they're targeting like more powerful platforms. Who's to say what the future is on like PlayStation and Xbox platforms a decade down the line, obviously. But you would have to imagine this next project won't be as held back as the previous one was with PS4 and Xbox One. Because what we have right now are very much capable consoles that are very much like more in tune with modern technology, even on PC.
Yeah.
Where it's at. So
that's the announcement on the Cyberpunk verse. Obviously, Phantom Liberty is still slated for next year. Obviously, we had already learned that there was a new project in the works for the Witcher series, ostensibly Witcher 4, that I don't think they've officially titled it. Well, we've learned that there are actually several Witcher properties in the works. And again, these are all just project names right now. The main one is Project Polaris. This is the next Witcher title currently in pre-production. With, as far as I understand, the majority of CD Projekt Red staff, this is the project they're on, which is the next Witcher project. However, the new news from this week is that they have claimed in this investor meeting that once Project Polaris releases, they are aiming to deliver The Witcher 5 and 6 within 6 years of that release. So stated another way, they're planning to release 3 Witcher games in the span of 6 years, which seems ambitious.
I will say the one saving grace is that if they're targeting the same platforms and they're going to be reusing a lot of assets, sure, they could probably manage it, but it's like still, like, especially after like all of the like horror stories of crunch on Cyberpunk, it's like hearing we are planning to get 2 more like AAA Witcher games out within like 3 years each. It definitely sounds like, from the outside looking in, as a statement being like, we are planning to throw all of our developers into a novelty life, like giant sized blender. You
have to hope that they can reuse assets, or the fact that they're planning it as a trilogy, that they can go in with the foresight of knowing what's going to be introduced in the first, second, and third game. Like, because obviously the first 3 games are called Witchers 1, 2, and 3, but each game plays significantly differently, and I think is on a different version of their engines. So maybe this next trilogy of games will be a little bit more closely tied together in a way. It's one of those things, because The Witcher 3 was really good, but obviously we don't want them to have to the human cost of creating such ambitious games in such a short span. I'd rather take your time, sort of thing. It's like that meme image where it's like, I want games with worse graphics that take longer to come out, just because I don't want to know that the people that made this game worked 80 hours a week to do it.
If I were to be charitable, the one saving grace they have is that they're only saying that they need to release the 2 other games within 6 years of the first game's release.
So they could do like pre-production.
They could totally like not release the first game until they are confident that they can get out the other 2 within 6 years.
Right.
And then, so it's like, will they do that? I don't know. I guess another saving grace is that they're going to have 2 other Witcher projects that are in development by different studios, which can make it so that they don't have to focus on this new trilogy if they can take the time, hopefully.
I mean, this also seems like to me, it's very like, it is all subject to change. I feel like there will be delays down the road. I don't think they like stick to this plan. I think it's very easy to say now, but I think like the reality is there will be delays, and this whole plan is the whole timeline will actually be more further extended out. This
is another thing that seems very investor focused, because is anyone here, or anyone that's even a big Witcher fan, are you more excited for Witcher 4 knowing that there's also going to be a 5 and 6? Not really.
If anything, I'm less excited.
I mean, not really, but then again, I'm into the Trail series, so it's like kind of like more territory too. So it's like, it's like a very comparable case.
Mm-hmm. And then, as James alluded to, so there is the Witcher trilogy of games in production under Project Polaris. We also have 2 spin-offs announced as well. One of them is Project Sirius, and this is the more confusing one, because this is the one that says Project Sirius, the first of the 2 spin-offs, is an innovative take on the Witcher universe, telling an unforgettable story for existing Witcher fans and new audiences, which doesn't give us a lot to latch on to. That's like
just
a side story.
Whole bunch of buzzwords.
Yeah,
get nothing.
So this is the project that is being developed by the Molasses Flood. It has currently, they've stated that there are 60 members of the studio working on this. But outside of the fact that it is a unforgettable story in the Witcher universe, there's not even anything to like speculate from. I guess it likely will have a different protagonist from whoever. We don't know anything about the protagonist of the next Witcher games, whether it's going to be Ciri or a new original character or whoever. I'm guessing that this will be a different perspective altogether, even potentially a different time period. But it's all, who knows at this point. Likely a smaller scope.
That's what investors want to hear. They want to hear that it's an unforgettable story for existing Witcher fans and new audiences.
Actually, now that I look at these two spin-offs, this second one is actually potentially even more confusing. So, all right, so that's Project Sirius. So to keep track, Polaris, Trilogy, Sirius, Unforgettable Story, side story. Project Canis Majoris. This is the other side. This is the other spin-off. This is a story-driven, single-player, open-world RPG set within the Witcher universe. So, like,
but it's not going to have an unforgettable story, though. Then why not?
But like, a single player open world RPG in the Witcher universe, so like Witcher 3 and ostensibly Witcher 4.
Like, why not?
This one, Project Canis Majoris, is currently being developed by an unknown third-party studio led by ex-Witcher veterans, which is strange because if they're making a Witcher game, how are they
making a Witcher game?
So like ex-CD Projekt devs, but are now whoever devs working on Witcher.
The logistics of that, and like it's like kind of humorous, right? Because it's like you're thinking about ex-Witcher veterans, like you would think that like, oh yes, I'm free from developing Witcher, I'm free from like CD Projekt, I can start out my new thing now and go my own path, and then it's like years later, it's like, hey, you want to make another Witcher? Like, fuck. We'll pay you this much. It's like, fuck. Well,
so between all these Witcher projects, there's, as far as I can tell, no expectation for like which to expect first and later, other than of course the trilogy entries. Like, are we going to see Witcher 4 before the side stories, or the side stories before 4? It's not clear, and we don't have any accompanying art or anything, which is just due to the fact that this was seemingly a meeting for financial purposes and investing, rather than for audience consumption. But there you go.
Can you imagine if I'm just saying, because can you imagine like if Falcom did this a similar thing of like future projects 10 years down the line? It's like, all right, in the next 10 years we're planning to release 7 Trails games in a 6-year period, and maybe 3 Yeast games, and that's it,
and one spin-off.
One spin-off, maybe, for feeling
a fighting game. We're making a kart race.
Still no Tokyo Xanadu too.
No. What's that?
Well, it doesn't always have to be in Tokyo. I mean, they could go to London and it'll be London Xanadu.
That'd be sick, actually.
The only thing also from this whole investor meeting is that the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt current generation upgrade is still slated for at some point this year. So like within the next 3 months. So we don't know what the date is on that.
It's like, if it's so slated for this year and you don't have, well, if it's actually coming out this year, you have a date in mind. If it's not coming out this year, don't say it is. Thank God.
Yeah, there isn't much time left in the year out of CD Projekt Red knows, but there's we're in October now.
So yeah, this is like one of the most like news-packed set of stories that we can't like. There's not a lot to just even like pull at or speculate from or be excited about, because we got a bunch of project names. We learned a little bit about some studios working on these games, but even then, it's very nebulous and a mystery on particularly that last project about who's even working on it. We might not be seeing any follow-up to any of the stuff other than the Witcher 3 update for a while. I won't be surprised if we don't hear anything next year about this stuff.
At the very least, there's no speculation like, what is CD Projekt Red gonna work on next? It's like, don't worry, buddy. You don't have to you don't have to ask that question in the next 5 years. You already know. You already know what's coming.
I can't believe I forgot a project. So this is another thing that is very little to latch on to, but CD Projekt is also working on a new IP that is outside of either the Cyberpunk or Witcher universe. So here's another project name for us to probably forget. Project Hadar, Hadar, Hadar. So this is a entirely distinct IP created from scratch within CD Projekt. So Of course, The Witcher is based off a series of books. Cyberpunk is based off a tabletop role-playing game. So this third project, Project Hadar, is an original IP from the studio itself. However,
I have to go for it. Go finish your thought.
Basically, I was just going to state that this project is only in like IP incubation. It's basically in the conceptual phase. So out of everything that we've listed here, Project Hadar is seemingly the furthest out. It seems like they're kind of in gathering ideas mode or writing kind of the background mode of what this even is.
You pretty much were going to say what I was going to say, because how Alex wrote this was, and I quoted, the studio says that quote unquote IP incubation has been ongoing since late 2021, and that game currently has a quote unquote strike team in the quote unquote conceptual phase. It's like, what does that mean?
It's like they've got three people meeting at a lunch table saying like, what do we think is neat? Is fantasy neat, or is it set in space? Does the guy have 2 arms or 4? The protagonist is a single player. I don't know. Just that's how I'm imagining it. Just like a bunch of guys just brainstorming neat ideas.
Like in my mind, how they came up with this project name was in Dragon Quest Die. There's a major antagonist named Hadlar, and then some guy was like a big fan. Is like, what if we just named it Hadar? Just take out the L, and that sounds cool too. Like, all right. So I mean, sure, I guess. Well, this thought of a maybe new IP will come out maybe in 20 years, maybe. So I don't know. Sure. At the very least, we can't say that CD Projekt Red is making a fuck ton of RPGs in the future.
Well, can't blame them for trying. Gotta restore that good name that they lost.
I mean, it's hard to imagine now, but like after The Witcher 3, they were kind of like beloved. They were on top of the world, and their reputation has tanked massively in like the last 4 years.
I'll be honest. I never really got that, because like even The Witcher 3 had a scandal at launch. It's just it wasn't really popular until it came like day and date on consoles. So I feel like a lot of people forget, but it's like it had a massive like scandal about like how the entire game was basically completely downgraded from like its initial like showing.
Yeah, that was like one of like the early modern instances of like downgraded graphics from after like the demo builds, preview demo build, when they were like showcasing that around, and then like it happened again with Cyberpunk, you know.
But it's just like Witcher 3 managed to stay upright and didn't have the bottom fall out, and then they tried the same thing with Cyberpunk and capsized.
And now it's like, and then now we're just like it's kind of gotten its resurgence to a certain degree because of the anime, you know, which is so Cyberpunk oddly is like in good quote unquote good graces again for the most part. So I don't know. Maybe it'll take another anime to save one of these future projects. Who can say? But
can't wait to see the Project Hadar anime.
Let's go. I'm excited. I don't even know what the fuck it is, but let's go.
Idol schoolgirls with CD Projekt Red.
Never mind. I'm out. Fuck that. But yeah, for people who are wondering if CD Projekt Red was going to shift genres anytime soon, no, they're firmly a RPG studio through and through.
Changing tacks entirely, we do have 2 bits of news from Atlas for this week, and one of which is one that I've kind of introduced earlier. That is, I have not had a chance yet to play Soul Hackers 2, which obviously came out in August, and wanted to try to play it on my Steam Deck. However, Atlas has announced that they are planning a free update patch to Soul Hackers 2, slated for at some point in November, though we don't have a specific date. So those of you that have played Soul Hackers 2, Adam and Josh, tell me how consequential this is. So they are adding a dash function to dungeons.
Good. Very good.
Okay. A high-speed mode for battles.
Very, very good.
And is that pretty much it? Oh, I guess they're adding 4 new companions. They're adding Pixie, Neko Shogun, Atvaris, and Isis. I recognize 3 of those.
Back up. That Pixie is already in the game. This is the Soul Hackers version of Pixie.
Oh, what does that mean?
It's just a different design for Pixie. It might have a different like moves as well, but it's just in the original Soul Hackers that had this distinct design for Pixie. Pixie, don't worry, Pixie, like your standard Pixie, like in all Mega 10 and Mega 10 spin-offs, it's still in the game.
Well, I'm surprised that like Neko Shogun wasn't already in the game.
Nope. It has like a weirdly like it's not like a super like crazy roster in terms of like when you're talking about quantity. Like, it's still a lot, but not like as much as like you would expect. It's not like the crazy like what 300 plus demons that like SMT4 Apocalypse had or something. But
I do like this. I'm always whenever I read a patch note like this, I'm always curious like what the impetus for this was. Adjusted dialogue selection at soul level increase to reduce accidental selection caused by repeated button presses.
It's because when you're in dialogue
Yeah.
and like you're just pressing A or whatever to get through it, the game would like have these choices pop up for your soul levels, and you would accidentally pick one because you were just mashing a button.
Yeah, basically like at
Stop
certain
button
points. Yeah, at certain points you like you can say like a response back, like a multiple dialogue choice, and then like when you hover these choices, you could actually see like almost like a social link rating number to your characters, and like it'll actually like show you this choice will add like increase the rating for this character, and this second choice will add this rating to this other character. There's like no difference in like the numbers, but it is a difference on like where you distribute those numbers, and that actually becomes important in the game because to reach like the true ending, you need to have like these ratings on these characters at a certain threshold to get the true endings like option, and that actually does have like a big gameplay and like it like has an impact on like the story and the gameplay of that game. So that's
for me like the fact that they're adding the high speed mode for battle, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I could start playing without that, but I know if I wait until they have that, I know I'll abuse the hell out of that. I always enjoy having a turbo mode for turn-based RPGs, so I will likely keep waiting.
Yeah, I mean, if I was like I was stuck whether I should continue playing this game or not. If I was still playing it, I would probably wait for the high speed mode because like I love high speed mode in RPGs. Just period. I went through the first Voice of Cards and they added a high speed battle mode like post launch, and I saw like how much that game ran at like normal mode versus high speed mode. I'm like, this game would be borderline miserable if I didn't play it at high speed battle or high speed mode in general. Because the standard like speed for that game is so freaking slow. I'm like,
Slackers 2 is another one of those games where it's hard to believe it was announced in February and now in August. Just like
it's kind of
when you get both sides
bad.
of the coin. You get Atlas doing that, or you get CD Projekt saying, "Here's what we're going to be releasing in a decade."
It kind of feels bad because like it feels like that Soul Hacker Souk has largely come and gone from my point of view. I don't know how others feel about it, but that to me that is a game that's like, yeah, it released, I beat it, and then like I never thought about it again after I beat it.
Where's Project Re Fantasy?
That doesn't exist, man. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Honestly, it feels like it doesn't exist.
The other thing that we got from Atlas this week are any other final thoughts on Soul Hackers?
I was about to say that's like
Project
Atlas's Project Hadar. That's what FRB Fantasy is.
An upcoming Atlas release for next year that we were already aware of were the console and PC ports for Shin Megami Tensei Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4, knowing that Persona 4 is already on PC but is coming to Switch and Xbox. We knew those were coming in 2023 after the release of Persona 5 on those consoles. We got a release date, and it's not a long wait for these games. So Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden, all those remaining ports, are set to release on January 19th. So only like 3 months away. Hard to believe that because it is already October 9th, 8th. What is today? What are we recording this on? We're recording this on the 8th. So a little over 3 months, we'll be able to play Persona 3 Portable on PC and Persona 4 Golden on Xbox if you want. So there's a lot of Persona for those that want to catch up. It started with 5 Royal and want to catch up on those games and play them on PC or on Switch or anything like that.
This release date announcement is technically the last Persona anniversary announcement according to the Japanese website.
Yeah.
So anyone who was expecting, they're gonna tease Persona 6 or whatnot.
I honestly thought they would. Like I didn't expect like a full-fledged like trailer, here's the release date coming out in 3 months, but like a logo, a character, a teaser, something like that seemed appropriate.
Well, also
announcement of a year-long event. Nope.
I'll give people this one for sure.
I just think it's just so funny that like they literally like listed here are all the announcements they're going to do. Like they quantified them, and one of them was the announcement of reports, and one of them was the release date. Like doubled up on their like counted announcements here.
No, I wasn't.
This is the most Atlas move.
I wasn't following this as closely as you guys, but when they announced this series 25th anniversary, it's the 25th, right?
I think so.
They included art from like the two Persona 2 games and Persona 1. I was like, oh, are they actually like going to incorporate the whole series? And nope, it's 3, 4, and 5 again.
No, they did. They incorporated the whole series in terms of like art and
merch.
Yeah.
Oh.
Not necessarily game boards, but for merch, yes.
Yeah, but it seems like from a game front, it's like 3, 4, and 5 again, right? It's these 3 games again.
I mean, even the new like key visual like for these release date announcements for Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden, like it's a nice like spiritual successor to that initial key art for Persona 3, but it has now Persona 3, 4, and 5 protagonists and their personas behind them in a classroom in that same perspective. So it just really drives home. It's like, yeah, there's so much Persona 1 and 2s. So, but hopefully, like now that like there's precedent that like they're coming to other platforms and they're open to re-releasing, like the logical thing would be like these things will probably sell well on all the platforms that they're releasing on. And the logical thing would be maybe we should do Persona 1 and 2, but because it's Atlas, especially modern Atlas, we don't fucking know. They are very unpredictable.
Oh, I must have misspoke. I thought these were coming to Switch too, but I guess not.
They are.
Oh, okay. We don't have the logo on Switch for P3 Portable yet on our site.
Well,
you know why? You know why we don't? It's because of the way these were announced. They like announced the Xbox port, and then they announced like the PC port, and then they announced the Switch port. Like staggered.
Like
so
staggered.
We like updated it after they announced the Xbox and PC, but then not Switch because the way they did these like staggered platform port announcements. So it's Atlas's fault.
Yeah, even then, like this release date announcement, like from what I see, like the only official things about these release date announcements is like it only lists them for Xbox, like consoles and Windows, even just like in Japan as well. But like going by like the way that they previously announced Persona 5 Royal and like and the staggered release date announcements, we're assuming like this is going to be a similar deal in the way that they announced this for other platforms with the same release date. It's so dumb. What deal?
Yeah, it ends up being that like Microsoft just ends up being the megaphone for like a multi-platform announcement, but they're like it's coming to Xbox, and then like footnotes and PC and Switch and Steam.
Yeah, remember when we had that few like almost like 20 hours of like, is this only for Xbox or is this coming to anything else? Is this coming to PC also? Is there coming like it was like that whole thing a few months back on when they first announced these like re-releases for Persona. It's like this is not just for Xbox, right? It was everyone's mind, and then now it's just like
and I'm looking back at some of our news posts from the summer, and yeah, it was a Nintendo Direct mini partner showcase also in June. Where these are also coming to Switch.
Yes,
so, all right,
yeah.
So okay, yeah. So sorry for the confusion, but yeah, it's due to the fact of the way that they announced these was inherently kind of confusing. But coming to PC, Switch, and Xbox and Windows Storm and all that stuff. And yes, we know that Persona 4 Golden's already on PC, but I saw like someone saying like it's already on PC. How come you're announcing it's coming for PC? It's just like, well, it's easier just to say it's coming to everything that it's not already on, rather than having that footnote. Because that was kind of I wonder if that was like almost like a proof of concept. Like, yeah, we can release these on PC and have success with this. So now let's get 5 and Persona 3 Portable on there.
Yeah, I imagine that's a big driving factor. I mean, Persona 4 Golden sold a shitload on Steam when it came out. It was like a shadow drop too.
Was that the first one or was Strikers first? I'm trying to remember.
Well, do we know how much Persona 5 costs, like on PC?
60.
Okay, because it's obviously a much newer game, but one of the reasons I think Persona 4 did well, it was like $30 or maybe $30 at launch. Like older game, but still, like that's a good price point. Whereas I know people were complaining that Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne was $50.
Yes.
Granted, that one had the new voice acting and whatnot. But Yeah,
I do agree that like it is still pretty high price point for that. Yeah, and obviously,
especially with the DLC for Dante and whatnot.
yeah, and I imagine people like there'll be definitely a crowd that like will wait for discounts for Persona 5 Royal, but I think a lot of people are just so excited for Persona 5 Royal that I think the $60 price tag might not deter as much people as we might think.
For other key news bits here, this next one's more of a financial update, and we're not like a financial or business focused site, so we don't talk about this a lot, but this one has just some interesting context around it, and we're going to be talking about Tri-Ace here. Tri-Ace is the developer, obviously, of the upcoming Star Ocean: The Divine Force, the main developer of the series in general. Kite ended up posting about this just because it's pretty interesting that we got a financial update for the studio, and we learned that in the last year that they have posted a very, very large loss for the company.
Let me just interrupt you real quick, because I guess Tri-Ace's fiscal year goes from July to July, unlike companies which are April to April. So it is October now, so we're getting the results for their previous year that just ended a couple months ago.
So yeah, so
not good.
As of June 2022, Tri-Ace's financial results are down 42.9% from the previous period. That's a loss of 625 million yen. So basically, they have been doing much poorer financially between 2021 and 2022 than they had previously. And I was trying to ask Josh a little bit of like, why is this inherently interesting? Obviously, other than the fact that they're releasing a game at the end of the month. And you had some interesting insight on that.
Yeah, obviously, like before Star Ocean: The Divine Force was announced and coming out, like the big thing that was really carrying Tri-Ace throughout the years was their Star Ocean Anamnesis mobile game, the free to play mobile game. It shut down years ago with the global version, unfortunately, but in Japan it was still going strong. I know for quite a while, but it recently shut down in Japan last year in June. And when you think about it, that game made them a boatload of money from year to year. Just it was a very strong game throughout them, and now like that was like their only like kind of remaining game, so they kind of had to like work on Star Ocean: The Divine Force without really getting much income, especially not getting that income that they would normally get from Anamnesis. So like when you think about like the contributing factors of like why are their financials so like way below than what they've been previously, it's because they don't have the financial backing and income that their Star Ocean mobile game had previously, and they currently don't have like a new like console game like out on the market as of this point, and now that they're working on. So when you combine those factors of basically not having income from their strongest title in years, but in terms of like money, not necessarily quality, but in terms of the financials, plus developing a new game entirely from scratch, it obviously will result in their financials taking a very, very big dip.
I think there's another element to this too. I mean, that's like the current, like that's all good and true and correct. Yes. But also just like Tri-Ace has been around quite a while. Like after spinning off of Namco's Wolf Team way back when to make the original Star Ocean, they're kind of like a classic JRPG developer, and maybe they lost their luster in recent years, but like back in the day, and they've been around a while. Like they have some pretty big classics on their hits on their like record, and the fact that it's like it's not unseeable that they could maybe not be around for much longer if things don't shape up soon. So it's just kind of sad,
right? It's not unreasonable or like to think that like, hey, if they continue to like go down on this downward trend, that like Square Enix are just like they're not under Square Enix, there, but it's like they'll
under
get less
Nepro Japan.
I was also looking into this. A lot of Enix properties from back in the day, like for example, Square Enix does not own the Dragon Quest IP. They own the games. It's actually owned by Armor Project, which is like basically Hori's company. And the reason why that is because of how Enix was set up back in the day. But Star Ocean is a little different. Star Ocean is owned by Square Enix. If Square Enix wants to, they can have someone else do it.
It's like how they did like with like the Valkyrie IP, you know, like
Valkyrie Profile was a Tri-Ace project.
Yeah, it's not tied to Tri-Ace. The Valkyrie Profile IP is with Square.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big problem with Tri-Ace. They don't seem to own any of their IPs, in my opinion. It's like they're just contracted to do these work, and if they don't have anything, they're kind of screwed.
Yeah, like they I'm trying to think of like a single like recognizable IP that Tri-Ace has worked on. I don't think they don't
archive.
No, I don't think there's no way.
They didn't work on that. I don't think
they developed that, but I don't know if they own it.
Is that right? Maybe or no, Access localized it. I forget.
Yeah,
I'll look this up. I'm curious.
Tri-Ace developed Exist Archive. I remember that. I do not think they own the IP to that. And even if they did, like, who cares? It's Exist Archive.
I think the only thing they own is probably Resonance of Fate.
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah. No, Resonance of Fate is Sega, and I just checked. Exist Archive
okay,
is
then they don't own anything then.
So
Exist Archive is what you said?
Spike Chunsoft.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, they don't really own.
I was looking up Tri-Ace Project, and they made a game called Silent Scope Bone Eater, and I'm like, what is this? Oh no,
never heard of it. Oh, Konami.
Yeah. So
ever played the Silent Scope arcade game back in the day?
Nope.
No, those are cool, but either way, like it's just, you know, I'm not gonna be here on BPR and be like, go get Star Ocean Divine Force, but like I'm gonna. It's not unreasonable to think that like, hey, if you want to see more Tri-Ace games in the future, like I assume the sales of Star Ocean: The Divine Force will have an impact. I don't know to say if it's a significant impact. I don't know how much. I'm not, I have no idea how much it will factor into their future. But I assume, logically speaking, having healthy sales for the next Star Ocean game coming out will bode well for them. And hopefully, like I really like in my mind, like for a low risk, low investment, like future for Tri-Ace, like I would think logically that Square Enix would want them to like re-release their older catalog as well, like the stuff they put out during the PS1 and PS2 era, because like Square Enix has been on the spree of like re-releasing much of their older catalog.
And for what it's worth, I'm pretty sure Tri-Ace didn't have anything to do, or very little to do, with the PSP versions of Star Ocean 1 and 2, and also Valkyrie Profile Lenneth. I'm pretty sure Tri-Ace also doesn't have a whole lot to do with that. I think basically they developed the original, and then Square Enix kind of took it over from there.
Yeah, Kite actually mentioned this at the end of his article, saying that the studio may not have had a direct hand in the newer remasters of Star Ocean First Departure R and Valkyrie Profile Lenneth, as these titles do not exist on Tri-Ace's portfolio on their site, and Square Enix did only mention original version developed by Tri-Ace in their copyright segments, as opposed to Last Hope's Star Ocean: The Last Hope's developed by Tri-Ace Inc. Like specifically mentioning that they developed it.
I almost forgot about Star Ocean First Departure R. I'm surprised they never ported that anywhere else, and they never followed up with the second entry.
Yeah, it's so puzzling. It's like it's one of those things that's like a re-release of this second Star Ocean game would probably do very well these days. But I don't know.
Yeah, First Departure R, I needed to remind myself. Yeah, First Departure R came out only on PS4.
Yes.
Oh no, wait, also Switch. It never came to PC.
Oh yeah, also Switch. Yeah.
Yeah, it never. So the thing I was thinking is that it never came to PC.
But we'll see. Well, I'm very curious to see what Tri-Ace does after Divine Force. Hopefully, they're working on something after Divine Force. But like I would, like we've all said it again and again. We really hope that this next Star Ocean game is very good. Like it's shaping up to be a cool game. We just hope, once the rubber meets the road, it actually is a really good game.
Yeah. Star Ocean, like ever since 2, has kind of been a series, maybe 3, has been a series that has had the potential but has never quite met it.
I'm very interested about whatever the hell that like one card game is that's in it, because like they didn't say it was under embargo, and like I saw a hint that there's something there that you can play. And it's like, what's it gonna be? Is it gonna be interesting?
Yeah, they showed off in a Japanese trailer, like the mini game, like the one that uses action figures. Like they showed a little bit of that off, and it looks neat.
We got some we got some updates for the upcoming Tactics Ogre Reborn. So these are from a website update as well as a newsletter from Square Enix. So Josh ended up putting together basically 2 news dumps for all the updates for Tactics Ogre Reborn, and it seems like both of these are kind of slated for those that are familiar with the PSP version of the game, Let Us Cling Together, and it talks about how certain mechanics under the hood work differently compared to the previous versions of the game. Some of these we've kind of already talked about, such as the crafting is now successful 100% of the time. They talked about some differences where in certain classes before, for certain abilities, required technical points in order to pull off their moves, but now that has been replaced with just a basic MP requirement. I don't know, Josh, as you put this together, because there's like quite a list of things here about unit development and about all those things that have been updated for this new version of the game.
Yeah, there's a lot that they actually like revealed. Like the crafting success being 100% is actually new. That's not something they've mentioned.
No, they've said
before.
they think they showed that at TGS. I know
they showed the multiple
I know a
items.
friend of mine, Duckroll, if you know him, saw this earlier and was like super hyped about it around the TGS timeframe. So it must have been mentioned somewhere.
I know they showed off like footage, but they showed off like it was more so the focus on the multiple items. I might have missed like it being 100% of the time on that like little clip, but I know the multiple like crafting multiple items and that little clip they shared at TGS was like new and unannounced before. It's like,
yeah,
okay,
the crafting cool. thing was always just kind of dumb because it's like, oh, you only have a 90% chance of it being successful. So you, of course, what do? You save and then you just reload it until it works. So it's just kind of like a pointless thing. It's like, just make it 100%. Come on.
Yeah, because you do so much crafting in that game in general. So it's just like having to go through that process is dumb. But yeah, like the first bit was like they put up a new blog that they usually do these days, and like just talking about like a good handful of the characters in the game and their profiles and some of the classes. It's standard stuff. It was funny to see that one of the commenters on that was like, "Oh, I didn't know Canopus was like 49 years old. That's a cool tidbit." Like,
he's also a Birdman.
Oh
yeah. Who knows what their like lifespan is?
So, but yeah, there's a lot of things they shared. Like it wasn't even like in the. It was kind of tucked away. It was like on their assets page on their press site. It was just like unassuming. They didn't put up like any like press release for it on the site. It's just like an asset that you found, which was like
Square Enix is doing this more often, where they just put up like information on their site, like it's like their press site, not their public site, and they don't like tell anyone that it's there. They just kind of like post it, and then like you kind of have to just stumble across it. Like you literally just go to the website for some reason, like, oh, here it is.
Yeah,
very weird.
But some of the key points that like a lot of it, people who have played Tactics Ogre Let Us Cling Together, they'll notice right away like equipment no longer has like restrictions like level restrictions or like meeting certain like specialty skills to equip it. Like pretty much anyone can equip whatever they want. The only restrictions are like class restrictions. Like knights can't equip like a bow and arrow, for example, stuff like that. So you're more versatile on like your equipment all around now, like just being able to equip them from the get-go.
Speaking of bow and arrow, they've got the trajectory prediction. So if you're like firing near a cliff or up a hill, you can see if it's actually going to hit your target or hit.
I saw someone mentioning that archers have been nerfed a bit because they were, especially in the early game, very powerful. So
yes.
Well, Canopus is an archer, right?
Yes, and Canopus is very good.
Yeah, archers are god in Let Us Cling Together, but maybe they definitely said that there should be a lot of bounce readjustments in this re-release. So just having working existing knowledge of like quote unquote meta in previous Tactics Ogres, might not work to your benefit because like for example, like the rogue class is like an enemy only unit now. That is not the rogue classes can no longer be played.
The things I'm curious about, like it's sort of hard for me to know. Like I never really had a problem with like the technical point system compared to the magic system. You like had to build it up, if I remember correctly, to do skills. And now it just comes from all comes from one pool. Is that like that sounds like a significant change, but will it like functionally change like my thoughts on mechanics? Like, it's hard to know until I like play it for a bit.
Pretty much, yeah. Like because it feels like the general like HP and MP pool feels like way more inflated than like the original release, like especially HP. So it's just like I don't know, like will that really like change like my decision making when using them? Because like you said, they weren't really hard to pull off in Let Us Cling Together.
Like I never would have told you like, oh, I really wish they changed the TP system. You know, I never would have told you that. So,
Me too.
So it's like, oh, I guess they changed it. I'll see how that works.
Yeah.
So,
then you like, you know, they have like a new items called charms now that you can equip on your party members, and they have like different effects. So like on some of them, like it'll make like grinding easier for catching classes up. But then you also have they took out like random encounters in the world map from the and now they replaced it with like training battles that you can do. That like your characters can't die these training battles. They're mainly for like, hey, if you want to grind units like in a more safe environment, you can do it. And this game does have auto battles, like an optional auto battle feature. So they have like certain like presets that like you can tweak with the auto battles. And then like if you just like want to like have your units like kind of grind themselves up on their own, you can do that and like just not pay attention to the game at a certain point. But like there's a limit to how much you can grind in this game, because there's this new like party like team limit or limit system where it's just like there's like an upper level, higher level where you can't like at certain points of the story, like say like your party level will be like let's say level 10. You can't go over level 10 until like you progress more into the story. So it's basically like the FF13 system where like you can't overgrind yourself. But the party
I'm
level,
wondering. This is something I feel like I forgot, but Chow would remember because Chow has a good memory. What is the system called where like if you go too law or too evil, like people might leave you?
I do know what you're talking about. Basically, you were too like faithful. It's like they were. Oh, again, I'm thinking about Final Fantasy Tactics when your faith system's too high. It's like they become religious and they just leave your group.
No,
or something.
yeah,
Oh
I
my
know what you're
God.
talking about, but I
Yeah,
think
I know
also
what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I just wonder
know.
if that was. I wonder if that was tweaked at all, because I remember playing the PSP version, which I love, but like there were points where like, oh, this character is like really picky about like my current like morale, or not morale, it's not the right word, but like how good or evil I am.
So you actually do
So I had to like grind up like my levels to keep them around. I'm gonna look this up. I forget what the system is called, and it's like on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah.
So
But
while you look
maybe
that up, we did get one other slight piece of news from one of their social media accounts. I forget if it was a Square Enix account or account specific for the game, but we got a preview at some of the English voice acting for the game that made the rounds.
It's one of those things. Like it feels like some of the English voice clips they've shared don't sound great, but then others is like perfectly fine and serviceable. But I still wouldn't call it great. And like, they've done like they've shared a lot more clips like the Japanese like audio, and like even the Japanese voice track like is like it's okay to me. They're like serviceable, but I wouldn't call them like wow, that's awesome. So like it's kind of like led me to like just maybe just like turning off voices in like my playthrough of this game. Like that's what I'm thinking right now. Like that's my current trajectory right now. I'm like maybe I should just turn off voices because I'm not really feeling any of the voice tracks in this game so far. So I don't know.
I forget which character it was, but I from a distance was following along in our Discord channel, and Adam was like, before I listen to this, I'm going to imagine the voice in my head. I'm imagining it's going to be like some snide, Studi character, and he's going to sound a little bit like this. And then his next thing was just ... just when he actually listened to the voice clip, and he's like, "What was that?"
Yeah,
and I think I forget the context, but I remember saying like for English voice acting, for whatever reason, a lot of times it sounds a lot better in context. I'm trying to keep an open mind, but just what they've shown, like what they've advertised the game with, it's like this is what you're going with for showing off the voice acting. And obviously, or I won't say obviously, I hope there's like an audio slider where you can just turn the voices to minimum and just play it as if it were on PSP, and just you don't need voice acting.
Yeah, I imagine that like they've had it like in almost all their releases. So I'm thinking of just like turning that slider to 0 and living my life the way I want to, which is fine. We're not throwing shade really at like any of the voice tracks. Like if you want to play it in English, you want to play it in Japanese, go for it. It's just like it's all about personal preferences and options. And yeah, that's about it. Other than that, like there's other neat gameplay tweaks. Like you can revive like incapacitated units. So when their HP goes to 0, they'll be at an incapacitated state, and you just have to go over to them. Kind of like Valkyria Chronicles, make sure you get to them in a certain time before that timer goes to 0. So other than that, it's kind of like just a neat hey, this is how we're revamping the game. It's not just like a 1-to-1 remaster, with everything intact. They kind of just spelled out all the tweaks coming, which is nice to know. It's kind of a shame, despite all these gameplay things, it's really cool for fans coming back to it. Still the major complaint, and maybe rightly so, is just the pixel filter in this game. Is just the overwhelming response to this whole project is not even in response to these gameplay changes. It's man, this sure does kind of look kind of bad, just because of the way they decided to filter just because of the visual presentation, really. And I don't know if they're going to allow you to mess with the visual filter whatsoever. Hopefully that's just one of those last thing announcements, or maybe just an option you find at release. But I don't think I think this is
OG graphic mode.
I just want them. Let me turn it off at least. Something that just I don't know. I don't like that washed out look.
Yeah. Adam, did you learn what that system was called?
No, I can't find it. I know.
Just shout and interrupt us when you do find it.
There's one thing I want to say.
Yeah.
I was saying, I was playing Final Fantasy 14, and I did the Iblis raid, and I was like, damn. I really want voice acting in Final Fantasy Tactics now, after hearing Thunder God Sid's voice. So that was for me, in English.
I would take a Tactics port of any sort playable on a modern platform, and I think that's not an uncommon wish for fans.
Hey, you can play it on your iOS. You have an iPhone, don't you?
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. I can play it on my own.
There you go. You did say you'll take any modern re-release. There you go.
Damn it, I guess I did say that. No, put it on Steam. Actually, that's the only one I'll accept.
Nope, you're married to it now.
Nah, damn it. Well, speaking of Final Fantasy 14, right before we started this podcast, James and Chow reminded me that there was a live letter this last week that is detailing the upcoming patch 6.25. So as always with Final Fantasy 14, I went over to novacrystalis.com to try to glean what this was, and someone that's not well versed in Final Fantasy 14 in general, for me, it's a bunch of gobbledygook. So I'll go hand it off to James just to see, from this live letter, just what are the kind of the key highlights for this upcoming patch that is releasing next week.
There isn't really that many major announcements from the live letter this time because 6.2 already came out. This is just some smaller details. We already know what's coming with 6.25. There was a reiteration that 6.3 will have an ultimate. There was some kind of how the sausage is made details about how the writing of 14 works and the process and how many some details about the team members that work on specific quest lines and stuff, which was really interesting, but not really something we should go on here. It's just if you're interested in that stuff, there is a summary of it with the slides that they showed on Nova Crystallis. There's two major announcements, I'd say. First off, FanFest is coming back. So starting next year, FanFest will be happening in Las Vegas, Nevada, London, and in other places around the world in person.
Yeah, a lot of my friends were very excited that they announced that FanFest is coming back. I guess this also means that they're going to start showing off the next expansion, right?
Yeah. Usually they have the announcement trailer for the expansion at FanFest. Because of the timing of this and usually how long they want to have the gap between the announcement and the release, it looks like that the 7.0 expansion won't be coming out next year. It'll probably be either early next year or in the summer. So they might be trying to stretch things out a bit to get back on the summer release schedule for expansions. We'll see. I don't think so. I think it'll probably be March or April. So
March or April, like release date 2024 or 2023?
2024.
Okay.
I think that's what they'll probably end up doing because they always want it. Well, it depends. It can kind of go on either side of it because of, how things go. It depends, I guess, on how Square feels about their financials, I'd imagine. But FanFest is coming back. There were some things shown off. Like they had a weapon design contest leading into Endwalker, and now like after Endwalker, they did have a separate mini contest for the 2 jobs added with Endwalker. So we do have some designs for Sage and Reaper that are going to be implemented in the game, as well as an announcement that there's like people can design new like furnishing for housing, and there might be a chance that that'll get added to the game. They kind of finished it off saying that All Saints Wake, so the Halloween event, will be happening in on October 19th through they didn't actually say when it was going to end, but patch 6.25 comes out on October 18th, so in about a week and a half.
Any significant things coming with that new patch that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, Criterion Dungeons. I feel like that's what most people are interested in, because we, quite frankly, like we've heard a lot about how they're supposed to work, but there's a lot that we just won't know until people have a chance to play it for themselves. Like especially the higher tier difficulties of it. They've talked a really like big game about how difficult they're supposed to be, to the point where they said that they were almost tempted to give it the Savage version of those dungeons the ultimate moniker instead. So we'll have to see if all that talk was for nothing, or if it's actually going to match up to reality.
That sounds pretty difficult then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just gonna say, what was it? They announced the relic weapon quest that you could do in 6.25, or is that after?
It's going to be in 6.25.
Okay,
but that
yeah,
doesn't really matter to the majority of players. So
I do like how you mentioned there is a little bit of just behind the scenes information in this live letter. The one thing that I picked out of there was one of the writers, Natsuko Ishikawa, says they like to write their lines in Notepad rather than Word or Excel, so that there is no like format conversion problems when posting it into the proper place, which is something I think we've all run into in one time or another. So,
Josh, I'm sorry again.
It's okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. Like, you know, it's one of those things that like just behind the scenes, like, you know, the way that like we work with our CMS behind the scenes. Like a lot of our writers, me included, we tend to write our drafts in Google Docs, and then we all find our own different ways to like convert it from like Google Docs to the CMS, because if you do a straight copy and paste,
you have to like highlight everything and then click remove text formatting.
Yeah, you have
usually
to
I do that. I forgot to do that with an article.
This week. I just get after people and kind of pull on their legs a little bit, like, hey, come on, you know, like remove the formatting here, because it just looks weird on the page. So like it reminds me of like when Brian was saying like the, you know, using the notepad, like Kite mentions, like, yeah, what I like to do is like I kind of do it non-conventionally, because I do it from Google Docs, then put it to Notepad, then on the CMS, because doing it through that way will remove the formatting, because if you do it through a Notepad first.
He's so
well. The senior writer on Final Fantasy 14 does the exact same thing, or the story designer. So
validation,
maybe not that unorthodox at all.
So that was an interesting tidbit that you decided to take out. It's like, oh, that's how Kite does it. For me, I do the laziest way, and like I do edit, select all, and then I do Control C, and then when I paste it, I hold down Control Shift and V on the CMS, so it'll automatically remove the formatting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The thing is that not all applications support Control Shift V. I think our CMS does, but in other places, I wish it all worked like that universally, like with just in the OS. But
yeah, our CMS supports that, thankfully, because if it did it, I'd be like, all right, well, maybe I'll do Kite's way.
By the way, I learned what the Tactics Ogre thing was.
Oh yeah.
So there's actually two things. One is simple. It's just a loyalty stat for each character, and like if you're doing the other routes, like you grab a unit from the Chaos route and then you do the Law route, sometimes you have to like be careful about their loyalty stat, because they'll be like disagreeing with all your decisions, and then they can't. I know there are. If I remember correctly, the samurai guy was really finicky. You had to get him to like stick around because he's like very picky about what you want him to do.
The loyalty stat. Yeah.
And then there's also the stat called Chaos Frame. I think that's the one I was thinking of. Chaos Frame. And it's not as important per character, except for one character, Chrysidia, who is the Necromancer. You have to have a certain Chaos Frame to get her. So those are the stats I was thinking of, and kind of curious. Like, I wonder if those are going to be changed at all. in the Reborn version. We'll see.
There you go. The more you learn.
The next, I know we're already 2.5 hours in, so all these remaining pieces of news we'll probably just touch on a more high level. We have a bunch of trailers for some upcoming games that have released and dropped in the last week. And obviously, discussing trailers, I want to make sure that we're discussing it in a manner that is meaningful other than just saying, just go watch the trailer. One of which, the one I'll open with, is the one that we introduced earlier, way earlier in the podcast, about the upcoming One Piece Odyssey, which, again, in case you forgot, is releasing next year in early January on the 13th for those of us in the States. When we last saw One Piece Odyssey out of TGS, there was a teaser at the very end of one of the TGS trailers suggesting that Vivi, a major character early in the series from the Alabasta arc, would somehow make an appearance. Well, the trailer that we got this week introduces how that exactly happens. So we know that One Piece Odyssey is a standalone story that is non-canon to the manga or the show. However, it will apparently feature an arc where they revisit the story of Alabasta in some sort of memory sequence, in which case Vivi will understandably take a major role. So for those that have nostalgia for early One Piece, I imagine that this is hitting them right in the nostalgia feels. For me, which, like, I didn't watch a lot of One Piece, but I did watch at least through the Alabasta arc. And to me, this just kind of seems a little bit like having your cake and eating it too, where it's like, oh, don't worry, this is a standalone story. You don't need to be caught up completely with One Piece in order to enjoy One Piece Odyssey. But also, we want to hit you in the nostalgia. So you like Alabasta, right? You like Vivi, right? We have that in the game too. It's a memory sequence, so don't think too deeply about it. I don't mean that as cynically as I sound. I do think that it actually is kind of a smart idea, but it does kind of tell me that the story of this game might be a little bit kind of all over the place if they're incorporating like memory sequences that tie into the overall narrative in a loose way, in addition to the standalone story.
This is primarily why I was like, Adam, I'm not writing this up. You do it because you know it. I was like, I'm not touching this. This seems like this piece of news drop. I'm being filtered right now. I don't know anything. I would have to go to like the wiki, the One Piece wiki, and be like, I don't know what's going on. So that's all I got out of it. I skimmed the trailer. I'm like, I have no idea what any of this is. And I even asked Adam. I was like, what's a Bon Clay? You said a Bon Clay.
And the trailer itself, just even outside of reintroducing Alabasta, does just show a lot of new footage, and I think that the game just has a really nice, charming art style. I'm still trying to get used to that. I forget her name. The game original character's look is very distinct and kind of different. Lim,
just like a 5 head or a 6 head instead of a 4 head.
Not only that, her eyes are very low on her head, and her head is like very small for her body. And like, all right, Oda kind of has some interesting like body proportions in his art style anyway. So I'm not trying to be too judgmental for being like not anatomically correct.
Look, at the very least, we know like people are popularizing One Piece character proportions through the Street Fighter 6 character creator.
I've seen a little bit of that over the weekend so far.
Gigantic arms, yeah.
So yeah, just kind of a fun trailer, and it shows a lot of not a lot of strict gameplay, but a lot of cutscenes and a good look at the art style and things like that.
This is also this isn't the first One Piece game to do this, but people have noticed that everyone gets a mini map except for Zoro, and if you're not familiar with One Piece, it's because one of Zoro's character traits is he always gets lost.
Yeah,
so he doesn't get
just like me, for real.
We did also get a very long trailer, a 14-minute gameplay overview for the upcoming Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. So I made sure to watch through all of this just so that I could actually speak to it to some extent before the podcast. And a lot of it is kind of touching on gameplay aspects that have already been shown or announced, but just giving it a little bit more detail. For instance, one of the last times we saw Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, they introduced that the game will progress through like 3 different story routes. You've got your typical gym challenge, which they're calling Victory Road. We've got this challenge where you like uncover mysteries of the area, which is they're calling Path of Legends. This is like the one that incorporates that giant crab Pokemon, who I'm forgetting who the name was, that they showed in a previous trailer that makes a reappearance here. And then the evil gang of this region, Team Star, they are calling that story progression its own separate thing, Starfall Street. So for those, if this game is more open-ended and more just kind of more sandboxy than the typical Pokemon game, it seems like those are the 3 major routes in which the story can progress. there was a lot of footage and gameplay talking about the terrorization, where they crystallize and take on a different element, a terra element, showing how wild Pokemon can take advantage of that, how terra raid battles work, and things like that. What else was there? There's, instead of a curry cooking mini game, there's like a sandwich making mini game.
Yeah,
So that's a bit silly.
The
Where'd
main
the ham come from? Oh no, LeChonk, watch out!
the main new features, like they were like emphasizing in this one, was like the picnics and like like you've seen like when you go on picnics, you can like wash your Pokemon, they get dirty, and then they, like you said, there's like this whole like constructing a sandwich mini game. Like you can actually like cook for like make meals for the Pokemon and you. And like James was alluding to, there's some meat that you can put in there, but they won't. They're being secret of like where's this meat coming from.
Personally, I prefer it when Pokemon doesn't hold back and just go like really commits to the idea of Pokemon being animals, which means of course people eat them.
Well, what was that other game that's like a Pokemon like, but it was like a more grim version of Pokemon?
Our World or something.
Something like it's like an incoming thing where there's like these factories and like the Pokemon are working in the factories. And
I don't want that grimdark.
And you have like a gun in them. Like
I want realistic, not grimdark.
Yeah, it's a very, very weird version of like taking the Pokemon concept into like its grim extreme. I forgot what it was called off the top of my head, but yeah,
I don't know why, but a part of this trailer that I just am dying at, even though it's not that funny, is the guy trying to put a cucumber on a sandwich and he just misses. He just whiffs, just falls off.
It's happened to all of us, except me. I don't put cucumbers in sandwiches because cucumbers are disgusting.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on pickles?
Also
disgusting. Alrighty.
That's just the most heinous thing on earth, really.
What are your thoughts on ham?
Really good. I can't have it that
really
much,
good.
but it's good. It's good. They introduced the TM machine, and they call it literally the technical machine in the game.
I like that.
You can use like these mats that you get from Pokemon and league points that you earn throughout the story to like craft TMs for you. They're like consumables of Pokemon moves, and like they're only single use, but you can craft them as many times as you want as long as you have the mats for them. Is this a good move, James?
For what?
The TM machine, the technical machine.
So it's a trade-off. Like in previous games, you had, well, in Generation 5, I believe, TMs were permanent, so you could always use them. And then I believe in either Gen 6, well, I don't know when they explicitly add them, but they added TRs, which are basically discs, well, TMs that break after one use, so like old style TMs. So now instead of having it be that it's like, oh, you have to buy TMs and they break, or instead of having it be where it's permanent, they're making it so that you get materials that you can craft into TMs that you can then teach Pokemon. And it's like, I'm seeing a lot of people that dislike the change, and I understand why. But I think from a gameplay loop perspective, especially with the fact that they're showing that even when you do like the Let's Go action that lets your Pokemon kind of just like go hog wild and attack whatever they see, you still get the materials. So if you know where to get the materials, I don't think it's gonna be that bad. And if anything, it gives you a reason to keep like exploring in areas that you already have been to. Because it's like, well, if you want to teach a Pokemon a specific move and you need like materials from battling certain wild Pokemon, it won't take that much longer than it currently does. It's just like, it is an additional step. I can understand why people don't like it. Personally, I think it's a good move.
Time to craft tables of drop rate tables of mats in this game. That's what it's going to lead to. Where do I find X mat?
Well, we already kind of had a little bit of that in Arceus, right?
Yeah.
And I'm really excited for this.
And then James touched on it, but we saw a little bit when they first introduced how some of like the Team Star hideouts would work, how there is a battle option independent from the traditional turn-based. I forget if it was named before this trailer, but yeah, it's called Let's Go. It's kind of a command that you give to your Pokemon that allows them to behave more independently, so you can battle wild Pokemon without going into an independent battle screen for each. So kind of a good move. You can kind of see how that came out of the gameplay of Legends Arceus, and should hopefully help remove the tedium from fighting wild Pokemon, especially if you're going to be doing it more frequently to gather resources and things like that.
And then out of this 14-minute trailer, they revealed a grand spanking number of 1 new Pokemon.
And we already talked about this earlier, right?
Yeah, the evolution
giraffe.
Yeah, well, how do you pronounce the Girafarig? Is that the name of
Girafarig,
the
yeah.
Girafarig. Yeah, sorry.
So when I saw I saw the name Farigiraf before I saw the art, and I was just thinking, because obviously Girafarig has a face and a tail with a face. So I was thinking Farigiraf, that's hard to say. I thought it would just be the Pokemon like turning around, where the previously was the tail would be the face and what was the face would be the tail. But no, now the tail like absorbs the face, like, and wears it like a hoodie almost. So
Yeah.
kind of strange, but the Pokemon itself is also kind of strange. So it works.
I guess, if you say so.
I do like how for all the terrorizations, it's very clear. Like, I mean, this was something that I guess was deduced earlier, but since I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the terraforms, the crystal forms, give your Pokemon a different type. The type of crystallization they see depends on the type. Like if it's a flying type, it's a bunch of crystal balloons hanging from their head. If it's a grass type, it's like a giant sunflower. If it's a ghost type, I think it was just a giant ghost. And I'm like, oh, that's how they designate what it looks like. On like, it's almost like they wear it like a hat while in crystal form. So it'll be interesting to see like how all those forms end up looking on all the different Pokemon, because it's pretty far reaching. Like as far as I can understand, any Pokemon can do that, and they can absorb any type. So we kind of talked about that. We kind of talked about this when it was first introduced, how because it is so open-ended, you have instead of being guard banded by your typical, this Pokemon is these 2 types, being able to incorporate in a way a third type to any Pokemon. So we don't know exactly how it's going to be balanced or limited or bound yet, but there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it seems very open-ended. I think that's just the ongoing theme of this like entry is like very open-ended, both in how you progress and how you play it.
Mm-hmm. A couple other trailers. A game that we talked about the last 2 weeks, the recently announced Wild Hearts. This is the EA published monster hunting game being developed by Omega Force. We got the reveal trailer last week that we talked about. And it kind of showcased a lot of the gameplay elements, including like the light crafting elements, several of the monsters that are going to be introduced. This week, we got a gameplay trailer specifically focusing on one of the monsters that was shown in the reveal trailer, and that is Kingtusk. So kind of think of like Beast Ganon mode, only with a planty element to it. So this trailer basically is just like the highlights of a 7-minute hunt between what eventually ends up being 3 players, because it's a 3-player co-op game, fighting a Kingtusk. It showcases a lot of the crafting elements. Like there's like a kind of like a zip line. There's a catapult. There's a kind of like a propeller hang glider thing that is shown. So, and then of course it showcases a few weapon types as well in this trailer.
It's kind of interesting, like how the weapon types like kind of like evolve. Like when the 3rd player shows up, like it comes like a dual, like it comes like it looks like they have like dual blades, and then they come together to make a double edge spear, and then at some point like they use them, they add like another thing to that weapon type where it turns like a gigantic shuriken. So it makes it like I really wonder how like the weapon types like are represented in the game, like if they just like have like different states or like different like I don't know, like range types and like closed weapon types or melee types. Like
yeah, exactly.
Like, it seems
how
like
that's going to be.
It seems like it seems like the weapon like kind of can change that. Like I don't know if like you have control over it or how you equip it. I'm not sure, but there's definitely a system in which like you're not stuck in like the same weapon throughout the hunt. It seems like you have options in the way you want to utilize a certain weapon. It looks really cool. That's all I can really say. Like pretty much, it looks pretty. It looks really cool. It's definitely different, but in a nice way. Like I really like the way that like you utilize like building structures. Like there's like one where like you build a structure. It's like a gigantic hammer that like bonks the Kingtusk. There's like another one where it's like about to ram into you, and like you construct like a wall for it to like run into, which is really cool.
I'm just imagining a board meeting between EA and Koei Tecmo executives, and they're like, this seems like an interesting idea, but it feels like we're missing something. And then just like the person bringing the coffee said, you guys should make something like Fortnite.
Fortnite.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the light crafting, but I appreciate it as trying something different rather than just being, we've got Monster Hunter at home. They're like, oh, you can craft a bomb that you place and then throw a shuriken at, or you can put up a wall really quickly if you know he's going to charge. So, and then I guess I forgot, I'm rewatching the trailer as we discuss it. This third player enters the arena by crafting a like catapult platform, like a sonic springboard, and then jumping on it. So,
Yeah.
some fun stuff. The one thing I do say, so this trailer, as indicated by its title, is mostly gameplay, but it doesn't show any UI, which I kind of get. They want to make it cinematic. They want to make a trailer, but I also just kind of wish, like, what does the UI look like? And maybe the reveal trailer, if I like went through that frame by frame, I could get glimpses of it. But I kind of just wished I saw it here. And I know we'll see it eventually, but
it's around the corner
7
pretty
minutes.
much. Like it's just February, thank God. So it's not like we don't have to worry about it for like it'll come in a reasonable time.
Right.
So it's not like
we went very quickly. Project Hadar. We went very quickly from learning that this project exists at all to getting a title for it to getting a pretty extensive gameplay look at it. So hard to have anything to really complain about by the way that they've unveiled this game in a pretty brisk pace.
Yeah.
And then we talked about this a little bit previously when we were talking about your time with Labyrinth of Refrain. That's the initial game that came out a few years ago. Labyrinth of Galleria is finally releasing in English next year.
Can I say something really quick?
Yeah, sure.
I'm far from the only person that's played Galleria in Japanese that is feeling this way. I would actually suggest not watching the story trailer because it showcases some characters that were not revealed in the Japanese marketing and were very obviously intended to be something you kind of discover in the game.
All right. So I guess I'll just state this as openly as possible. We have posted on our website a Labyrinth of Galleria, the Moon Society story trailer. So that is there. But if you have significant interest in this game, based on people who have played the game in Japanese, it sounds like you might want to just go in blind and skip it until you've already played the game. But we do have that trailer up on the site. And again, the release date for the English release is mid-February of next year. And then the last trailer is one we've kind of already talked about, the game that Adam opened this podcast with, which is the Asterigos Curse of the Stars. We got a thorough gameplay overview video for that game. If you listen to Adam talk about it and you're interested in seeing what it looks like or might play like, we do have that trailer up on the site as well. We'll go through some dates and maybe a sales update at the very end here. So this is one of the longest titles that I think we've had to talk about on the podcast so far. Warhammer 40K Inquisitor Martyr Ultimate Edition will be releasing on Xbox Series and PlayStation 5 in late October, on October 27th.
Competing with Star Ocean, so big decisions to be made that day.
Yeah. World of Warcraft. I think back when it got announced, like way early this year, its 9th, I believe, expansion, Dragonflight, was announced, and we have a release date for it. It is coming out in late November, November 28th. I don't think anyone here has kept up with World of Warcraft in a while, but I feel like
I constantly communicating with a friend who is keeping up with WoW. He's not current WoW. He's playing Wrath of the Lich King Classic.
I feel like I know more people that are playing Classic than retail right now.
It's funny because he got banned for a week for like the trading gold, so he has to like catch up with his current like guild now for a raid. So he has to get from level 70 to level 80 within this weekend, pretty much, to catch up on raids. So it's a busy time. A nice side effect of him being banned for a week is he got to focus on Kuro too. Didn't have to worry about WoW Classic during that time, so that worked out for me and him in that aspect. But now he's just doing the grind from 70 to 80 this weekend.
Well, so this is something that those that are up to date on World of Warcraft could probably speak to, but I'm reading some of like the bullet points for Dragonflight, and it's like we'll have a new level cap of 70, but the level cap was higher than that, right? But then they squished it.
Yeah.
And now they're just like expanding it out again. So it's like, oh, it's kind of a strange thing. But when a game has been going,
it's so weird because like you deal with like you're recently getting to number bloat again that you recently squished down. So now they're like building back up to it again. So MMOs are weird, man, especially long running MMOs.
Yeah, especially one that's going into like its 16th year. It's not that old. When did World of Warcraft come out?
I don't know. This kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy 14 with Shadowbringers when they had the.
Oh no, it is that old.
Yeah, it is that old. It's like they came out 2002, right?
2004, according to Wikipedia.
Oh, so, Jesus.
We're old.
So they're probably
we're ancient. We're fossils.
Not as old as Final Fantasy 11.
It's true.
Yep. A couple other release dates. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is finally getting its next gen update, also in January 13th. If anyone's been waiting for that or wants to replay it with the updated graphics.
Oh, on my birthday.
There you go.
Oh,
Ooh, congrats.
And I guess maybe it's worth mentioning that they actually changed how the game looks a little bit, which people seem mixed on.
Yeah, it's interesting though that, well, first off, the people are saying, oh, the old versions look better, when you can look at that one photo with the water and it's like there's no reflections. It looks so flat and wrong. How do you say that looks better?
I think for people like there are some people that like feel like that the more quote unquote simplified visuals are more into the spirit of the anime. Like that's the only way I can reason with it, but I don't know. It is different, and like whether it's more to the spirit or not.
I wonder if the PC version will get the updated graphics or not.
And by the way, if you do own the game on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, you can upgrade to the next gen version for free.
Yes.
And if you don't, there is a next gen physical copy for PS5 and Series X that's $20, which is honestly not bad.
Here's another game that I don't think we've talked about on the site or podcast before, but is interesting for some of the context around it. And that is we have Atone, Heart of the Elder Tree, is a mythological RPG based on Norse mythology that is releasing on Switch and PC next year in early 2023. This is a very artsy game, and the announcement of this console release, I guess console and PC release, did get accompanied by an announcement trailer for it. This is interesting because this is another game similar to Various Daylife that originally released as an Apple Arcade exclusive, but is now going to be coming to other services, and even has a demo on Steam available to try out if you're interested. So just a few times that we've seen in different contexts where games that were originally on Apple Arcade and nothing else are slowly filtering away from there to be on more kind of more open platforms. I was wondering if anyone was going to bring up Fantasian in response to that.
I can't say the F word, dude.
Nope. Sorry, my bad.
It's like I keep trying to tell people to play Fantasian. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, so this game has a little bit of so the actual game here being announced, Atone, Heart of the Elder Tree, it kind of looks a little bit like Sword and Sorcery or maybe Banner Saga. But yeah, so that one will come out early next year. We don't have a specific date, but it does have a demo on Steam if you want to try it out. And then the last thing for a release date, well, this isn't actually a release date, but something that might be announced soon, is that spotted on a Taiwanese ratings website, we have seen a listing for the Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition. We don't have a lot of context about what this actually is, but likely a safe guess. Outer Worlds released back in 2019. It then did have a couple follow-up DLCs that I think Adam ended up covering both of those for us, Peril on Gorgon and Murder on Eridanos. So chances are that this is a kind of bundle pack gold edition of those things packed in, though we do not know that for sure. Don't have a release date or anything other than just the listing spotted on a website. Won't be surprised if this is something that they end up throwing out upon once we get more details on the upcoming sequel to that game.
Makes sense. Before the sequel releases, which might still be a ways off, re-release it for modern consoles with a DLC. Makes sense. The original, I mean.
And then the last thing here is something that I think Josh snuck onto the podcast doc right at the end. It's about we talked last week. Nope, not
Chow.
Nope, who was this? Chow. Wow, Chow getting bold. I appreciate it. So we talked last week about obviously Kuro no Kiseki 2 released in Japan, and we had a chance to talk about it at a very high, spoiler-free as possible level as we could. We did get a sales update for the game from Famitsu, and Chow, what are we looking at here?
It's about 50,000 if you combine both PS4 and the PS5 versions. So
Yeah,
it's like
so
beating Kuro 1 numbers.
okay, so for context here, Kuro no Kiseki 1, first week sales was 50,144. Kuro no Kiseki 2 is 50,707 units. This physical sales across PS4 and PS5. The first game is a little bit different because it only released on PS4 and then a PS5 version came later, way later. So it's performing very identically to the first game, physical sales wise. And that's
Also, I've seen some people say that's bad, and it is because it's not selling as well as previous Trails games. But two things: Falcom's on the record that like other Asian territories in the West are also like more significant to them now than when Cold Steel first started. And two, there's always a drop off when it comes to sequels. And Kuro was billed as something you could start with. And to their credit, even if you do gain a lot from having played the rest of the series, you can totally start with Kuro. So.
it is still a significant drop off when you're comparing it to like just first week comparison sales. Like to Cold Steel 3 was 104,401. For Cold Steel 4, it was 97,158. For Hajimari, it was 83,680. And Kondo has already gone on record and saying like the first Kuno no Kiseki, was below expectations. So the first Kuro game, like Falcom even themselves considered it didn't sell within their expectations. So for the sequel to only perform just as well as the first one from the get go, only first week sales accounted for, and this one had a lot more marketing and did a lot of things to try and appease old fans. In my opinion, to its detriment, is not a great look initially right now. I would say I'm very interested to see how it does in other territories as time goes on, obviously, because of course those are important factors as well. But I don't think their strategy with the sequel has paid off at the moment. Only counting these when you only factor in these numbers compared to past Trails games. So we'll see what they decide to do from here on out. Obviously, they've been teasing the new East game. I imagine that's next year's game. Who knows? We don't know yet. But I can only imagine taking in the context and the sales data and what their feelings were on the first game. I can only imagine that they're not really happy right now with how this game has been performing in its first week.
It's worth noting also that several months ago, when we translated that interview with Kondo, where he said that he wants to port the rest of the Trail series to Switch, that he did say that the company is looking into trying to get Kuro on it.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
Yeah.
Like, because even comparing like the PS4 sales from when Cold Steel 3 first came out to now, it's like an inevitability of the market is that in Japan, like PlayStation in general just does not do nearly as well as back then. Switch is basically ate up. Like there have been multiple weeks where the Famitsu, well, the media creates like top 30 sold games for that week was nothing but Switch titles, no PlayStation whatsoever. So yeah, again, it's definitely not as much as I'm sure they wanted, but I feel like matching Kuro for the sequel is probably about what they expected.
I wonder. Let's see if it is within their expectations this time around. Who knows? I just think I think there are things about Kuro too that they've made moves to it that leads me to believe that like they really want this to sell more. That's why it definitely does have some DNA as like older games, older arcs in it, like the way that they presented it and the way they marketed it. It leads me to believe that they really want this to sell way better than the first game, and to see that it hasn't paid off, it's like, okay, well, those are decisions that you made. So
They're back to the scratching board, I guess.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt. But they already tried that with Kuro, so that's back to the scratching board. So we'll see. I don't know. Best of luck. I really wonder where that series is gonna. What is next for that series? Because I'll just say I was shaking my head after that Kuro 2.
Did the Switch port from Trails from Zero release in Japan? Or did they get an earlier Switch port from a different developer?
They got an earlier Switch port from Clouded Leopard.
Okay. And with the sales update aside, that kind of covers us for the news. And I guess just in time, since we're approaching the end of our third hour here. So kind of a surprising news dump in lieu of having a lot of major releases early in October. But thanks for everyone here for covering everything so thoroughly, from indie RPGs to surprising news out of CD Projekt that we won't see, manifest for several years, to stuff that kind of came out of nowhere that we're already looking forward to that's only a few months away, like Wild Hearts. We have all these news posts, all the trailers that we talked about, including all the features like that James had put up and others up on the website at rpgsite.net. You can join us on our Discord channel at discord.gg/rpgsite. We're also on all the social media platforms. You can follow RPG Site on primarily on Twitter, but also on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening. If you do listen to this podcast on either directly from the website or on Spotify or iTunes or Google Podcasts, so go ahead and leave us a rating, leave us a review, comment on our YouTube upload. Let us know how we're doing, what we can keep doing well, and what we might be able to do better.
Don't worry. If you've got some criticism, we can handle it.
If you want more updates on Gundam Witch from Mercury weekly, you know which podcast to check out.
Yep. First, it'll be the first timestamp on this one. So
next week,
all right.
Will they kiss?
Yeah, and until you hear from us next week, stay safe and take care, and we'll talk to you then.